Chapter 2076, Against a God Artifact. 1. Big Brother. Why, you've helped us again. At this moment, Xiao Man's voice rang out from behind. She had woken up. Currently, she endured the pain she felt as she slowly stood up from the ground while gritting her teeth. Her bright eyes looked around with some worry. Ever since the mysterious power started to protect her, her wounds healed at an especially rapid pace, where she had mostly recovered now. As such, she was basically fine. Xiao Man, are you fine? Ziyun arrived beside Xiao Man quickly with concern and worry. She subconsciously reached out to hold Xiao Man, but she was unable to touch Xiao Man at all. An invisible power that even the senses of the soul could not discover had blocked her. Xiao Man clearly had no idea what had happened to her. She looked around at the God Kings that amounted to over 100, and she gradually became despaired. Sister Ziyun, are we done for? Xiao Man asked softly as her face was ashen. She was very dejected. Then she looked at Chen's back and said, Big Brother, go. Don't worry about us. Don't worry, Xiao Man. You've received the protection of the Neptunian Divine Palace, so no one here can harm you. Even if I die, you won't be in any danger at all. Xiao Man, if I die here, you have to learn how to take care of yourself, said Ziyun. The current situation was not optimistic at all. Even with Chen present, she was not confident about surviving. No, I don't want you to die. You've suffered so much because of me. I will never let anything happen to you. Even if I die, I won't let you encounter any danger at all, Xiao Man said seriously as tears rolled down her cheeks. The two of them were not connected by blood, but they were so close that it had already surpassed a connection through blood. This was because in the face of truly life-threatening danger, even some people as close as brothers might abandon their connection and turn their backs on their friends to flee for their lives. Xiao Man and Ziyun would not do that. Chen looked back at Ziyun and Xiao Man as he hesitated slightly. In the end, he made up his mind and took out the Inata Tower. The Inata Tower was only the size of a fist in his hand, but when it landed on the ground, it had already become 30 meters tall. Who said you would die here? Get in there quick. If you don't waste time, you still might survive, but if this continues, you'll truly be doomed, Chen called out to Ziyun and Xiao Man. Chen, you better give up on these futile efforts. Can't you see the situation right now? It's impossible for you to take the girl away today. Mr. Shu was not in a hurry to fight. He stood there leisurely as he spoke to Chen. Chen, we have no interest in the girl, nor do we want the Chaotic Prime's legacy. Just hand over the heavenly resources you obtained from the Divine Medicinal Garden to share, and we'll leave immediately, a God King said from within the crowd. Hee, the girl does have some secrets, but I know my limits. I know that no matter what the secret is, it's not something that we can take part in. Let's leave it to the Supreme God Kings to fight over. I'm only interested in the Chaotic Prime's legacy. Chen, aren't you too naive? Do you think you can leave just because of that ruined tower? The God Kings and the surrounding sneered. At this moment, another two figures shot over from the distance. They were an old man and a young man. Chen's eyes narrowed when these two people arrived. He was not unfamiliar with the two of them. One of them was Mo Cheng, who held first place on the Overgod's plaque. Mo Cheng was still an Overgod right now, so Chen did not care too much about him. However, he did not dare to underestimate the old man beside him. Chen was in no mood to bother with Mr. Shu. He arrived beside Ziyun with a flash and grabbed her shoulder without saying anything before tossing her into the Inata Tower. Then he called out to Xiao Man, quit staring. Get in there. Seeing Ziyun enter the Inata Tower, Xiao Man naturally did not hesitate either. She quickly charged towards the Inata Tower, but just when she stepped through its entrance, the mysterious power that protected her appeared and formed an invisible barrier that blocked her way, preventing her from entering the tower. This girl should be somehow connected to the Neptunian Divine Palace, where the power of the palace protects her. As for the tower, it seems extremely damaged, but it's actually extraordinary. If I've guessed correctly, this tower should be able to keep out the power of the Neptunian Divine Palace, or the power of the palace would not be obstructing the girl's entry, as it'll become useless once she does go in there. Zhang Ying, who stood beside Mo Cheng, stared at Xiao Man in interest before studying the tower. He seemed to be in thought. The Neptunian Divine Palace is a high-quality god artifact. Even though there isn't an artifact spirit, it's still extremely powerful. Just what level of quality is this tower on if even the palace's power can't enter it? Mo Cheng was surprised. This tower is a god artifact at the very least because only god artifacts, regardless of quality, can cut off the power of the palace, said Zhang Ying. To another side, Chen saw that Xiao Man could not enter the Inata tower, and a gleam of light immediately flashed through his eyes. With a cold snort, he immediately controlled the power that belonged to the Inata tower. Now that Chen had refined up to the 5th floor of the Inata tower, he possessed basic control over it, which included the sliver of power in the Inata tower. Even though the sliver of power was very weak and would not have astonishing effects against opponents, it could be extremely useful at certain times. Under Chen's control, the power immediately emerged, causing the tower to shine with a faint, golden light. Wherever the light reached, it seemed to become its own world, like an independent space. When the golden light covered Xiao Man, the mysterious power around her was immediately cut off. Without its obstruction, Xiao Man crossed over into the Inata tower immediately. At the same time, the seals left behind by the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt on the Inata tower began to awaken. All the slashes on the tower began to shine and suppress the tower's power. In less than 5 seconds, the power that Chen had used from the tower was firmly suppressed by the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt seal. Immediately, the Inata tower stopped shining and became ordinary again. With a wave of his hand, Chen stowed the Inata tower away as quickly as he could. After calling out to Kaya, the two of them flew away with lightning speed. The current situation was extremely bad for them. Clearly, it was inconvenient for them to deal with the 9th Prince's people. If they remained behind, even more supreme god kings would gather over, and it would become an even more difficult situation. Chen, do you still think you can escape? Mr. Shu smiled gently. The cataclysmic onyx wind fan had already appeared in his hand. He swung it gently, and the world around them seemed to darken. Even the origin energy became extremely disorderly as a black gust of wind suddenly appeared, sweeping towards Chen with devastating power. God artifact. The god kings in the surroundings cried out as they all stared at the fan in Mr. Shu's hand. They were shocked. Chapter 2077, Against a God Artifact, 2. To many god kings, god artifacts were items that they could only wish for. It could even be considered as an item of legends, as it would be very difficult for them to see one. Now that Mr. Shu had revealed his god artifact, he immediately became the center of attention, drawing the gazes of everyone. Many god kings who gathered in the surroundings looked at Mr. Shu with flickering gazes as burning desire that was hidden in their hearts sprang into existence. However, after comparing their strength, they could only suppress this desire helplessly. In their eyes, Chen was a very powerful and terrifying person. If supreme god kings from the god king's throne were not present, it would be very difficult to find him an opponent. Yet at that moment, everyone believed that Mr. Shu was far more powerful than Chen with the god artifact in his hand. Chen is truly done for this time. No god king can withstand the might of a god artifact. They're dead for sure. I just hope that person called Mr. Shu doesn't go too far, that he leaves something behind that we can scavenge from. All the god kings present sighed secretly. None of them believed Chen was Mr. Shu's opponent. After all, a god artifact could not be underestimated. It had just appeared, yet the disturbance it had caused was breathtaking. Was there anyone who could put up a fight against it among god kings? In a single instance, the terrifying black wind engulfed Chen. It revolved around Chen with a terrifying force that was enough to rip earth from the ground as it cut at him like blades. Not only did it prevent Chen from leaving, but the light around Chen immediately darkened from the black whirlwind as well. His clothes were reduced to tatters in a split second, leaving behind countless cut-like marks. The wind was just too frightening. Even Chen's chaotic body struggled to endure it. Countless cuts appeared on him as his skin was split open. Chaotic blood oozed out, reducing him to a bloody figure in a single instance. Yin Xian beside the fifth prince became worried when she saw Chen suffer so much right from the start. She pleaded, "Fifth prince, Chen saved my life after all. Please let Chen go for me. As long as you let Chen go, I will never forget your kindness for the rest of my life." The fifth prince's eyes became even colder when he heard that. Not only did Yin Xian's pleadings fail to lessen the fifth prince's killing intent towards Chen, but it had even made it more intense instead. "I've already given Chen a chance, but he's not clever enough. Death would be a light punishment," the fifth prince said icily. Despair flickered through Yin Xian's eyes immediately. She looked at the people beside the fifth prince deeply and thought, "Chen, I am not someone who is devoid of gratitude. I will remember your kindness. If you die here today, I swear I will take revenge for you in the future." Behind, Yun Lianqing sighed inside. Out of all the god kings of the Yun family, he was on the best terms with Chen, yet there was nothing he could do in the current situation. It looks like god artifacts are only so-so. At this moment, Chen, who was trapped in the black whirlwind and that many people believed would not last much longer, suddenly called out coldly. The sword in his hands suddenly shone brightly and turned into a huge stream of light that he swung out with. The sword chi was as intense as torrential rain as it spanned across the sky. It also contained devastating chaotic force. Boom! The sword chi collided with the black whirlwind. As the two powerful forces clashed, they created deafening sounds. Chen used this opportunity to break free from the whirlwind, stepping out from it. Even though Chen was covered in blood right now and was in quite a miserable shape, only Chen knew that his wounds were only scratches. They had not reached his tendons or bones. After all, he had already reached the 12th layer of the chaotic body. The toughness of his body alone was no less than a defensive high-quality saint artifact. When he emerged from the whirlwind, his wounds healed at a visible rate. What terrifying regeneration! The surrounding god kings naturally saw this. They all gasped as they looked at Chen like they were looking at a monster. Mr. Shu's eyes narrowed, and he became slightly sterner. However, at this moment, an intense golden light condensed around Chen, forming a strand of Daoist sword chi in a single instance. It shot towards Mr. Shu. At the same time, Chen fused with his sword and charged towards Mr. Shu behind the sword chi. Mr. Shu remained calm and composed. He was extremely confident, as if no one could triumph over him. He gently swung his fan, and it created an extremely brutal gust of wind that blew towards the sword chi. As the sword chi dispersed, Chen had already shot over with his sword. His presence churned as he gave off shocking battle intent. He stabbed out with all his strength. Mr. Shu's expression did not change at all. Faced with Chen's lightning-fast strike that contained shocking power, he only placed his fan in front of him and blocked the attack. Chen and Mr. Shu's battle was extremely fierce. The two of them struck out, clashed, and collided time and time again. The energy ripples were so terrifyingly powerful that many observing god kings shook in surprise. This was because both Mr. Shu, who used a god artifact and had reached the peak of god king long ago, and Chen, who used a supreme quality saint artifact and was only an early god king, displayed extremely shocking battle prowess. It made many late god kings shiver in fear. The god kings and the surroundings backed up time and time again. Many early and mid-god kings were completely unable to endure the terrifying shockwaves from the battle. In particular, Mr. Shu's cataclysmic onyx wind fan would create a terrifying gust of wind each time he swung it. The wind was so powerful that even a few late god kings did not dare to come in contact with it. Boom! 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 Booms constantly rang out in the sky. Chen did not hold back at all, unleashing his full strength against Mr. Shu. They fought their way up into the sky, and then back to the ground, crossing several tens of thousand kilometers. Sharp sword chi mingled with the whistling dark wind, splaying out in the air like beautiful fireworks. Terrifying ripples of energy shook up the surroundings, where people a million kilometers away could sense it clearly. Chen was battered and bruised now. Chaotic blood dripped from the sky, as he had become completely bloodied as he fought Mr. Shu. He had completely lost the upper hand. Even though Chen seemed to be very heavily injured, he did not show any weakness at all. Instead, he became bolder the more he fought. Not only did the chaotic body grant him a superior physique and regeneration, but it had also given him a terrifying amount of endurance as well. Before him, Mr. Shu had gone from indifferent at the very start to sternness. His snow-white clothes had also become splashed with blood. This was his own blood. Chen's strength had completely exceeded his expectations, so he discovered that even with a god artifact, he struggled to kill Chen immediately. In the distance, Chen watched the battle sternly. After becoming a god king, the strength that Chen displayed had completely exceeded his expectation as well. Zhang stared at their battle as well from beside Chen. He said slowly, "The person with the god artifact is not weak. With his strength, it's enough for him to make it onto the God King's throne." However, the rankings on the God King's throne only has 1,000 places, where it only records 1,000 of the strongest God Kings, so making it onto the God King's throne is not necessarily enough to leave behind your name. He probably failed to leave his name on the God King's throne. As for that person called Chen, he's able to fight an expert like that to such an intensity despite only having just become a God King while being injured. He's a complete deviant. Regardless of the outcome, Chen's name will be learnt by many after this battle. Below, Kaya also watched silently as Chen fought Mr. Shu. She did not interfere as she murmured, Chen is suffering from the god artifact. If that person called Mr. Shu did not have a god artifact, Chen's strength would be more than enough to defeat him, and if Chen uses all of his trump cards, he should be able to kill him. That power Chen uses is very powerful, but I feel that it's somewhat familiar for some reason, but I can't remember why. To another side, the fifth prince of the Sky Empire revealed an extremely ugly expression. He watched Chen fight Mr. Shu with great intensity as he felt disbelief. He struggled to accept this. He understood Mr. Shu's strength, and with a god artifact in hand, he was someone who could do whatever he wished in the Neptunian Divine Palace even though he was unable to unleash the full might of the god artifact. However, he was now locked in combat with someone who had just become a god king for quite a short time. God damn it, the fifth prince cursed inside. Only now did he realize just how terrifying of a person he had offended. Unfortunately, he had already passed the point of no return. Moreover, with his personality, he would never allow himself to turn back in the first place. Whether it was because of Jian killing by Qi and the other or because of Yun Xian who was supposed to become his wife, he would not allow himself to let Jian go. Mr. Shu, you have to kill Jian right here no matter what. You can't let him escape, the fifth prince said to Mr. Shu secretly. Jian's strength made him shiver, and on his side, only Mr. Shu could fend off Jian. Mr. Shu frowned when he received the fifth prince's message. After fighting Jian for so long, he understood Jian's strength much better than anyone else. He seemed like he had the upper hand on the surface, completely suppressing Jian through the might of his god artifact, but he also knew that even though Jian seemed to be very heavily injured, his battle prowess had not weakened at all. Jian stood firm and fought steadily, using a supreme quality saint artifact against his god artifact. It seemed extremely dangerous, where his sword had been knocked away several times, but he had not suffered a life-threatening wound at all. Moreover, the burden of using a god artifact was far greater than anyone could imagine. After all, only infinite primes could use god artifacts as they wished through the tremendous power of their cultivation. Mr. Shu was only a god king, so the difference in the power of his cultivation to infinite primes was extremely large. Even though he could just barely use this god artifact through special means, he could not last for long. Mr. Shu's eyes gradually turned cold as his presence rapidly soared. He used his full strength, unleashing the limit of the god artifact. He knew that he could not draw things out and needed to finish the battle soon. Immediately, the cataclysmic onyx wind fan shone with blinding light as it pulsed with powerful energy. A terrifying dark whirlwind, powerful enough to rip through space, swept over, whistling towards Chen with terrifying might. From afar, the dark whirlwind seemed to fill the entire sky, obscuring the moon and stars and plunging the world into darkness. It was a shocking sight. Chen hovered in the air. He was soaked in blood, but his presence surged out as a powerful sword intent revolved around him. He bellowed out and sent several strands of golden sword chi that were several meters long towards the whirlwind as he laughed aloud. It looks like God artifacts really are so-so. We will fight again in the future, Mr. Shu. Farewell. With that, Chen turned around and shot off into the distance, no longer dwelling on the battle. The disturbance from his fight with Mr. Shu was just too great. The violent shockwaves of energy wreaked havoc in the surroundings, where they could be clearly sensed from even 1,000,000 kilometers away. More and more people hurried over right now, so if this continued, the situation would only develop badly for him. When Chen retreated, Kaya turned into a blur and unleashed her full speed as well, flying towards the 8th floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace with Chen. Don't let them escape, there are still so many heavenly resources on him. Everyone pursue, we can't let them leave the Neptunian Divine Palace, and a chaotic prime's legacy is with Chen as well. Chen has taken so many good things all for himself, so we can't let him have it easy. Chase him, no matter how powerful he is, he's alone. We have so many people, so are we supposed to even fear him? As soon as Chen and Kaya retreated, the expressions of the god kings in the surroundings immediately changed. They all pursued loudly. Chen, leave behind the girl, and I'll get out of your way. Otherwise, you won't be able to leave here today, Mr. Shu said calmly and steadily. He pursued with his god artifact. Mr. Shu was already a late god king. He possessed many secret techniques, so he was naturally much faster than Chen. In just a few seconds, he blocked Chen again. Mr. Shu, you are indeed very powerful, but if I want to leave wholeheartedly, just you is not enough to stop me, Chen laughed aloud as his presence surged. The laws of the sword condensed as he stabbed out as hard as he could. This time, Kaya did not choose to stand down. When Chen attacked, she moved as well. She did not use any saint artifacts. Instead, she struck out with her slender hand using the laws of destruction. In Mr. Shu's eyes, Chen was his only opponent, so he naturally placed all his attention on him. He never thought that Kaya, who had only become a god king recently, would attack him at this moment. Moreover, Kaya's palm strike was extremely swift, where it seemed to move through the fabric of space-time. By the time Mr. Shu reacted, it was already too late. Kaya's hand easily tore through the barrier of energy around Mr. Shu with the power of the laws of destruction and struck his chest with great speed. Mr. Shu's face changed suddenly, and a mouthful of blood immediately spurted from his mouth. He was blown far away, and his entire chest had already caved in. Kaya's attack possessed formidable power. It was no weaker than a full-powered strike from Chen. Mr. Shu had been caught off guard, so he was heavily injured in a single instance. He became frail. He only stabilized himself with much difficulty after flying several thousand meters. His face was pale as his body tottered in the air. He stared at Kaya in shock as he became filled with surprise. From Kaya's palm strike alone, he could tell that Kaya's strength was definitely not as simple as it seemed on the surface. She was also an early god king, but her true battle prowess was no less than Chen's. Chen and Kaya did not remain for a single moment after heavily injuring Mr. Shu. They continued towards the 8th floor. Mr. Shu watched Chen and Kaya travel away with much reluctance. After coughing up a few mouthfuls of blood, he looked behind him. An old man and a young man hovered there. To no surprise, one of them was the supreme overgod Mo Cheng, while the other person was the mysterious old man who had always accompanied Mo Cheng. Mr. Shu's gaze directly ignored Mo Cheng and focused on the old man behind Mo Cheng. His lips moved slightly as he communicated with him from very far away. "Tsang, you must have seen how extraordinary that girl is. She's able to receive the protection of the world within the Neptunian Divine Palace, which means there's a huge secret related to the Neptunian divine palace hidden on her. Doesn't that interest you? Moreover, the Neptunian moon that hasn't made an appearance for millions of years has actually appeared at this moment. Haven't you ever wondered whether the appearance of the Neptunian moon has something to do with the girl? Mr. Shu was clearly very cautious about Tsang, and he also showed some admiration. That was because Tsang was a true supreme god king who had made it onto the god king's throne, and he ranked at 950th. He was extremely powerful. A gleam of light flickered through Tsang Ying's eyes with that. He gazed at Jian, Chen and Kai in the distance, and after hesitating slightly, he vanished from Mo Chang's side with a single movement. He directly flew towards Jian, Chen and Kai with a terrifying speed. A dense, azure light appeared around him, which seemed to form the blurry image of an eagle. Ahead, Jian, Chen and Kai seemed to sense something. They suddenly looked back and just happened to see Tsang approach them rapidly. It made their eyes narrow. What shocking speed! Jian Chen shivered inside. He had always feared Tsang inside. Although he had not seen Tsang fight personally, he knew that he was definitely much more powerful than Mr. Shu. Be careful, Jian Chen. Kai became stern. To them, he would definitely be a difficult opponent. Tsang shone with azure light as he shot over like a huge, monstrous bird. He moved with shocking speed, catching up to Jian Chen and Kai in a single instance. His hands turned into 5 eagle talons as he swept them towards both Jian Chen and Kai. When Tsang struck out, a terrifying pulse of energy immediately surged from him. It truly was world-shaking and extremely terrifying, enough to make the moon and stars pale and shock all god kings. Previously, Tsang had hidden his strength. Only at the moment he struck out did he expose his true power. Jian Chen was stern. At the same time, strands of destructive chaotic force gushed out of his chaotic Niden, forming surging rivers as they rampaged through his body rapidly. Not only did he push his defenses to the maximum, but a strand of extremely powerful chaotic force had also condensed on his sword silently. Immediately, Jian Chen's sword went from the initial silver-white to a dark gray. Destructive, violent power radiated from it, giving off a chilling presence. Afterwards, Jian Chen called out, and he suddenly swung his sword as a streak of dark light. At the same time, Kai struck out as well. She raised her hand and condensed the power of the laws of destruction, turning it into an inscription of the laws of the world. It shot out with a profound presence. Their attacks collided with Tsang Ying's talons at basically the same time. A layer of densely packed azure scales seemed to appear on Tsang Ying's hands, covering every inch of it. Ding! Boom! 2 sounds enough to deafen people exploded. When Jian Chen's strike that contained chaotic force collided with Tsang Ying's hand, it actually produced a screech of metal. Tsang Ying's hand was extremely tough, even tougher than a high-quality saint artifact. Jian Chen even felt like he did not stab Tsang Ying's hand with his attack. Rather, it seemed like he struck a supreme-quality saint artifact. This was because the feeling that Tsang Ying's hand gave Jian Chen was just like a supreme-quality saint artifact. Jian Chen and Kai both drifted backwards after the strike. Tsang Ying was just too powerful, far more powerful than Mr. Shu. They failed to gain the upper hand even when working together. However, Tsang Ying did not gain the upper hand either when he fought the two of them together. His body shook violently as he retreated uncontrollably in the air. The laws of destruction seem different. It's the same laws, yet they're actually so powerful in this woman's hands. Tsang Ying stared at Kaiya with surprise and confusion. He could tell with a single glance that Kaiya was only an early god king while her comprehension of the laws of destruction remained at early god king as well. However, in Kaiya's hands, the laws of destruction were actually even more powerful than late god kings, which shocked him deeply. There seems to be something extra in the laws of destruction. Tsang Ying frowned as he recalled every moment of contact with the laws of destruction when he clashed with Kaiya earlier. However, he was unable to understand the mystery at all due to his limited cultivation and knowledge. I need to capture that girl and interrogate her properly. If she possesses a secret technique, it'll be extremely significant to the clan. A gleam of light flickered through Tsang Ying's eyes. With a single movement, he shot towards Jian, Chen and Kaya again. But this time, his primary target had shifted from Jian, Chen to Kaya. Tsang Ying moved just far too quickly. Faced with Tsang Ying's pursuit, the two of them were unable to flee at all. With no other choice, they could only attack together, retreating as they fought. The strength Tsang Ying displayed increased. He formed claws with both hands that could rip through anything. Every strike was so powerful that not only did Jian, Chen and Kaya's pressure increase by several folds, but even the god kings who hurried over from behind shivered when they saw them. Tsang Ying is much more powerful than I imagined him to be. Mr. Shu became extremely stern as well when he saw Tsang Ying fight. He was also a supreme expert who made it onto the god king's throne, but he failed to make the rankings. Originally, he believed that even if there was a difference between his and Tsang Ying's strength, it would be very limited, but only now did he understand just how great the difference was. Supreme god kings from the god king's throne are actually so powerful that it's unbelievable. Moreover, Tsang Ying is only ranked 950th on the god king's throne. I really struggle to imagine just how astonishing the god kings who rank in the top 100 or even the top 10 are. The fifth prince of the Sky Empire was shocked. As the prince of an eternal empire that had existed for millions of years, this was his first time seeing a supreme god king fight. The terrifying, astonishing battle prowess had an unprecedented impact on him. With a supreme god king taking part, Jian Chen is dead for sure. The fifth prince thought. His occasional glance towards Jian Chen was cold. Suddenly, the world darkened as a terrifying might permeated the surroundings. Two huge hands filled the surroundings, replacing the sky and obscuring the Neptunian moon. They slammed down towards the ground with terrifying force. The two hands were covered in azure scales. Every single scale pulsed with powerful energy as they flickered with hazy, azure light. When the hands fell, the pressure caused the entire ground to sink as the vegetation was pulverized. This was a powerful strike from Tsang Ying. It was so powerful that it caused many god kings behind to pale in fright as they felt like the world was ending. Jian Chen roared out and used his full strength. He turned into the sword as he shot into the sky as a resplendent streak of light, colliding with the huge hand with the greatest intensity so far. Boom! Jian Chen was smacked into the ground with that. Half of him had become buried while blood oozed from the corner of his mouth. Kaya was emotionless, and her eyes were cold. At that moment, her mind seemed to empty out as her entire body calmed down, entering a state of no thought. She pointed her hands at the sky, and immediately, the power of the laws of creation, destruction, and fire condensed together, revolving around her. Kaya used the three laws without any hesitation at all. The three powers all shot out. It was so powerful that it had reached a new level. In particular, when the three powers merged together, it seemed to resonate with the laws of the world, shooting out as a streak of light. Crack! Kaya's strike possessed unfathomable power. When the powers of the three laws collided with the huge hand that descended, there was an immediate, crisp sound. The azure scales there actually cracked, forming a hole where blood poured out like rain from the sky. Tsang Ying grunted as he staggered backwards. Seeing how the scales on his hand had cracked, he was shocked inside. Disbelief filled his face. How is this possible? How on earth is this possible? These scales came from Master when he molted, which he then bestowed to me. They're so powerful that they've completely exceeded supreme quality saint artifacts in toughness. They've reached the level of god artifacts, so how did they shatter? Tsang Ying stared at the cracked scales on his hand as his heart churned. When Tsang Ying was with Mo Cheng, he had always remained calm and expressionless. Regardless of how great of a matter happened, it would struggle to make his expression change. As a result, he always gave off a feeling that he was someone knowledgeable and wise, as if he had seen the entire world and there was nothing left. But now, the layer of scales on his hand had cracked. Tsang Ying struggled to maintain his aloof exterior. His heart, which had been as calm as still water, now seemed like someone had tossed in a large rock, creating large splashes. He was perturbed. His scaled armor was a pseudo-god artifact. Even though it was not a true god artifact, it was not much weaker than one, yet that strike had damaged it. Song would not have been so surprised if the person who damaged it was a supreme god king who ranked within the top 10 of the god king's throne. That was because there were rumors that experts like that could bypass a major realm of cultivation and fend off primordial realm experts or even slay infinite primes. They were extremely powerful. However, the person who had damaged his armor just happened to be a woman who had become a god king recently. It was impossible for Tsang to not be shocked. However, his shock was soon followed by great joy and burning desire. It was to the point where Tsang basically treated Kaya with much more importance than Xiao Man. I have to capture this woman and understand the secret behind her usage of laws. I have to get this secret technique no matter what. Tsang secretly made up his mind as he struck out with his full strength in an attempt to capture Kaya. However, although Kaya was far weaker than Tsang in terms of cultivation, her unmatched mastery over the usage of the laws granted her battle prowess that was not much weaker than Tsang. Moreover, she had Chen's assistance. Under their teamwork, there was nothing much that Tsang could do to them, even though he was a supreme god king on the god king's throne. Moreover, a major part of why Tsang could display his astonishing strength earlier was because of the azure scales that surpassed supreme quality saint artifacts and were only below god artifacts. Now that it had cracked, it would affect his battle prowess to a certain degree. Seeing Chen and Kaya get closer and closer to the passage to the 8th floor as they fought and retreated, Tsang began to secretly feel worried as well. Then he suddenly looked at Mr. Shu behind him, and he growled, "You keep Chen busy while I'll deal with the woman. Once I capture her, I'll help you against Chen." Behind them, Mr. Shu had already mostly recovered from his wounds after ingesting god-tier healing pills. He charged over without any hesitation after hearing Tsang words, engaging in an intense battle against Chen with the cataclysmic onyx wind fan. Mr. Shu had understood the situation long ago. If they wanted to deal with Chen and Kaya, it was impossible for either of them to do it alone. Only by working together would they be able to achieve their goals. Chen was kept busy by Mr. Shu, while Kaya faced the barrage of attacks from Tsang all by herself. Immediately, the pressure she experienced multiplied as she found it more and more arduous. However, it was still difficult for Tsang to capture Kaya despite that being the case. The battle between the four of them had already reached a great intensity. None of them held back, unleashing their full strength. It was chaotic as the world around them seemed to pale in comparison. It shook up the entire 9th floor. Soon after their battle began, Mr. Shu showed signs of weakness first. Using the god artifact over long periods of time depleted his origin energy rapidly. Coupled with his unhealed wounds, he struggled to last for very long. On the other hand, Chen was even more heavily injured than Mr. Shu. He was covered in blood and had even been directly struck by the god artifact, littering him with wounds and causing chaotic blood to splash everywhere. However, his battle prowess did not decrease at all, making him seem like a beast in human form. He seemed like something that could not be killed no matter what was tried. Boom! Finally, under the vicious collision this time, Mr. Shu, who was clearly weakening, was blown away by Chen in a single stroke. The god artifact in his hand dimmed as well after losing the support of sufficient origin energy. Even if Mr. Shu consumed a recovery pill to recover his origin energy, it would be nowhere near enough to match the depletion rate of using a god artifact. Freed from Mr. Shu, Chen immediately charged towards Tsang and engaged in a great battle against him to relieve Kaya's pressure. "Tsang, I've done all I can. It'll be up to you next," Mr. Shu said from afar as he seemed rather disheveled. The battle had an extremely great impact on him. He was a mighty peak god king, yet he actually lost to an early god king while wielding a god artifact. He felt shame from this. In reality, it was not because Mr. Shu was weaker than Chen. It was just that he did not possess a body as tough as Chen's and did not have the powerful energy support of chaotic force. Chen is already injured. He can't last for too long. Everyone, attack him together. I only want the girl. You can have everything else on Chen, Tsang called out. He wanted to borrow everyone's power to deal with Jian, Chen and Kaya because he truly did not have the opportunity to capture Kaya when the two were fighting together. However, Zhang Ying's urges were useless. Although over 200 god kings had gathered in the surroundings now, and all of them wanted something on Jian Chen, none of them were willing to become Jian Chen's first target after understanding how powerful he was. At this moment, a blinding streak of light shot over from the distance. It moved extremely quickly, shooting over with a flash directly towards their location. It was a 10-meter-long sword that shimmered with light. It shone like the sun as it dyed the pitch-black night white as day. A young man in golden robes stood on the sword. He only seemed to be in his 20s, and he was extremely handsome. His facial features were chiseled while his face was cold. Powerful sword intent revolved around him. He was an expert of the laws of the sword, having reached peak God King already. The sword intent around him never dispersed, making him seem like an unmatched sword of power. The young man in gold had ridden over on his sword before stopping several kilometers away to witness the battle between Jian Chen, Kaya, and Zhang Ying. He coldly glanced past the several hundred god kings who tailed the three of them closely as he said emotionlessly, "I heard a girl who is protected by the world has appeared on the 9th floor. Do you know about this?" From that, many of the god kings shivered inside. They could already deduce that the young man in gold had probably come down from the 10th floor from what he said. Seeing how no one replied, the young man's face sank slightly. He snorted coldly as a supreme presence radiated from him along with powerful sword intent that flooded over the god kings in an overwhelming fashion. Immediately, the expressions of many of the god kings changed. Under the young man's presence, many of the weaker god kings felt like they had entered a roaring wave, where they could be submerged at any time. Did you not hear what this king said? The young man in gold said coldly as his face was frigid. He glared at the god kings. He seemed condescending, and it was like he was looking down on everyone. "Gongzheng, you've come at a perfect time. The girl you speak of does exist. She's currently with Jian Chen. This person is Jian Chen. If you're interested in the girl, hurry up and start fighting, or things will become difficult once Jian Chen escapes from the Neptunian Divine Palace," Zhang Ying said in a timely manner. His old voice was powerful. However, when the surrounding god kings heard the name, Gongzheng, many of their expressions changed. Their gazes towards the young man changed drastically as they showed fear and some dread. Is he the supreme god king from the god king's throne, Gongzheng? It's said that Gongzheng is the successor of the solitary sword lineage. People call him the minor heavenly king of the solitary sword. He's extremely powerful, and ever since he started cultivating, he has never suffered a defeat against opponents of the same level. He ranks 900th on the god king's throne. I never thought he would actually be the supreme god king, Gongzheng. He truly is worthy of being the successor of the solitary sword lineage. He's extremely cold as expected, where you can tell with a single glance that he's a vicious and heartless person. Gongzheng clearly came for Jian Chen. No matter how incredible Jian Chen is, his cultivation is still lacking. There's no chance for him to survive before Gongzheng, many god kings discussed among themselves. Many of them had lived for extremely long times, so they had memorized every single name on the god king's throne. As a result, they had recalled a lot of related information as soon as the name Gongzheng was mentioned. Gongzheng has come at a perfect time. I'd like to see how you escape now. Gongzheng's ranking on the god king's throne is even higher than Zhang Ying's, the fifth prince of the Sky Empire celebrated secretly. He thought about how Gongzheng's timing was perfect. As for Yin Xian and Yun Lianqing beside the fifth prince, they began to worry for Jian Chen once again. Just Zhang Ying alone required both Jian Chen and Kaya to work together to contend against. Now that Gongzheng, who ranked much higher than Zhang Ying, had come, what was Jian Chen and Kaya supposed to do to hold him off? Gongzheng stared at Jian Chen and said in an arrogant fashion, "I have no interest in fighting you, so you better hand over the girl." Gongzheng seemed cool on the surface, but he was actually nowhere close to being calm on the inside. Naturally, he could tell that Jian Chen and Kaya's realm of cultivation was not powerful, only having become god kings recently, but they were still able to engage in such an intense battle against a god king on the god king's throne. This shocked him very much. Even across the entire Saints world, there were only a handful of monsters like this. Yet, he had encountered two of them together right now. Chen's heart suddenly sank. Previously, the thing that worried him the most was that the more time he wasted, the more powerful people would gather over. Unfortunately, he and Kaya had been kept busy by Tsang Ying and Mr. Shu, and they struggled to break free, so the last thing he wished to see still happened. Gong Zheng was very powerful. He had already heard that Gong Zheng ranked higher on the God King's throne than Tsang Ying, so if Gong Zheng entered the battle, the situation would not be very optimistic. However, right when Gong Zheng finished speaking, another three extremely powerful presences appeared on the distant horizon, surging over like tidal waves as they rapidly approached their location. Even though the people were nowhere to be seen, it was possible to tell that the three of them did not pale in comparison to Tsang Ying and Gong Zheng from their presences alone. More Supreme God Kings. Heavens, is this a gathering of Supreme God Kings? 3 Supreme God Kings have come all of a sudden. That's 5 Supreme God Kings in total. I have never seen so many Supreme God Kings gathered together in my life. They've either come for the God-tier heavenly resources or that girl. Chen is dead for sure. Many of the God Kings in the surroundings were surprised. Was this going to be a gathering of Supreme God Kings? Chen and Kaya were extremely stern. With 5 Supreme God Kings here, they felt pressure so great that they had never experienced it before. The situation was worsening for them. We can't waste any more time, or we really won't be able to make it out of here. Chen's face turned cold as determination filled his face. At the same time, Gong Zheng's face changed slightly. He thought, it's them. I never thought they'd come down from the 10th floor as well. No, the girl can't end up with them. With that, Gong Zheng struck out decisively. The sword below his feet flew into his hand as a streak of light. He held his sword, and he seemed to become a god of the sword as he directly swung it at Chen. Immediately, his sword shone with blinding light, and a huge streak of light several hundred meters in length shot through the air towards Chen with lightning speed. Within the sword chi was an intent that represented destruction and also invoked despair within people. It affected the minds of many of the god kings in the surroundings, causing their willpower to waver. This was the profound truths of the Solitude Sword. If those with weak willpower faced the sword chi, they would struggle to put up any resistance under the influence of the profound truths. Chen's willpower was firm like steel and did not waver at all. He used the Tai sword technique. Sword chi gathered around him, and he turned into the sword, shooting over as a streak of light. Boom! With a loud sound, the two attacks collided, and sword chi scattered in all directions. Gong Zheng's huge sword chi was dispersed by Chen while the light around Chen dulled. He charged forwards boldly at the cost of a few bone-deep slashes. He headed directly towards Gong Zheng. His presence was shocking as he seemed unstoppable. And you still want to resist? I'll cripple you first, and then capture you. Gong Zheng's eyes were cold as he said frigidly. The laws of the sword condensed around him, causing him to shine blindingly. He was already prepared to use his full strength and finish the battle quickly. This was because he needed to take the girl from Chen before the 3 people arrived. Time was of the essence. Chen had already approached Gong Zheng now. Suddenly, a powerful sword intent enough to make the world shake radiated from him, and a finger-sized strand of silver-white sword chi silently appeared above his head. The sword chi was small, but it was extremely terrifying. It had enough power to make the world rumble. It caused the expressions of all the god kings around to change drastically as they shivered inside. Even the expression of a supreme god king as powerful as Gong Zheng changed at that moment. He struggled to maintain his composure because he experienced a huge threat from the sword chi. It was so powerful that he had never experienced something like this before, making his very soul tremble. Tsang Ying, who fought Kaya, shivered inside as well. Suddenly, he looked at Chen as his old face was filled with surprise. Swish! It was also at this moment that a flash enough to make the world pale appeared. The strand of profound sword chi above Jian Chen's head shot out. It moved extremely quickly, basically bypassing any distance that existed between it and Gongzheng, arriving before Gongzheng's forehead in a split second. Gongzheng paled in shock as his pupils narrowed to the size of pin tips at that moment. They became silver-white as they reflected the blinding light from the profound sword chi. Chapter 2082. Returning to the 8th floor, the profound sword chi moved just too quickly. It was so fast that Gongzheng was unable to respond to it. He could only watch on as the finger-sized sword chi approached his forehead at an unbelievable speed. Spurt. Like a hot knife through butter, the profound sword chi tore through Gongzheng's layers of protection and punctured his forehead, striking his soul. Immediately, Gongzheng experienced excruciating pain in his soul. He could not help but produce a heart-wrenching scream, and he even struggled to remain afloat. He struggled along the way as he directly fell to the ground, landing heavily. Gongzheng was a supreme god king from the god king's throne. Not only was his strength great, but his soul was powerful as well, so he did not die after receiving Jian Chen's profound sword chi. However, his soul was heavily injured, making it impossible for him to recover quickly. He was incapacitated. Originally, Jian Chen wanted to pursue and kill Gongzheng off for good because in his current state, he could not fight back at all. Let alone god kings, but even an over-god could kill him. However, after he looked over at the 3 powerful presences in the distance that rapidly grew closer, Jian Chen could not help but give up on that thought. Even though killing Gongzheng would only take a split second, that split second could determine life or death. Nearby, Zhang Ying's face paled slightly when he personally witnessed Gongzheng's fate. His gaze towards Jian Chen was filled with deep fear. However, in the next moment, Zhang Ying's eyes suddenly narrowed. Dread filled his face as he saw a second strand of profound sword chi above Jian Chen's head. Jian Chen looked over, and the profound sword chi targeted him. With Gongzheng's fate presented right before him, Zhang Ying's fear towards the profound sword chi had risen to the point where he was frightened by the attack or even terrified of it. Seeing how Jian Chen was about to send the second strand of profound sword chi his way, he shot backwards without any hesitation, basically out of reflex. Azure light flickered around him as he unleashed his full speed, arriving 10,000 kilometers away in a single instance. He looked at Jian Chen from there as his heart was filled with fear and caution. He was already ready to flee at any time. Originally, Jian Chen wanted to use the second strand of profound sword chi to heavily injure Zhang Ying, but seeing how he had already retreated to over 10,000 kilometers away, he was no longer in Jian Chen's way, which was naturally something Jian Chen wished to see. He stowed the second strand of sword chi away immediately and quickly fled with Kaya. Jian Chen did not want to use the profound sword chi if he did not have to, because every time he used a strand, it would drain a great deal of the power of his soul and would affect his battle prowess. Zhang Ying and Mr. Shu were not his only opponents, as there were also many other people who had gathered here for his treasures. As a result, he had to preserve some strength against the many god kings in the surroundings when he fought Zhang Ying and Mr. Shu. But right now, several supreme god kings were gathering here, which made Jian Chen feel great danger. He could only use the profound sword chi, as he had no other choice. Even though he had only used a single strand of profound sword chi, it had drained a third of the power of Jian Chen's soul. Immediately, he experienced a weak sense of dizziness. However, the depletion from a single strand of profound sword chi did not affect Jian Chen too much. Taking advantage of this temporary moment, Jian Chen and Kaya shot off into the distance. At the same time, the owners of the 3 powerful presences had arrived. A thick layer of light caused by laws surrounded them, obscuring their appearance. Only a blurry figure could be made out through the light. They were 2 women and 1 man. As soon as they arrived, a terrifying pressure flooded out in the surroundings. Many weaker god kings felt like they were suffocating as if a rock was pressed against their chest. The 3 of them were no weaker than Zhang Ying and Gongzheng. They were also supreme god kings who ranked on the god king's throne, making them extremely powerful. As soon as the 3 supreme god kings arrived, they stared at Gongzheng, who squirmed on the ground as he clutched his head and called out painfully. Their faces changed as a result. Gong Zheng's soul is injured. I can sense that at least half of it has collapsed. It'll be impossible for him to recover from an injury like this in a short amount of time, said a woman among the three. Her voice was like the sounds of nature and extremely pleasant, enough to tempt people into wanting to see her true appearance. Gong Zheng also came down from the 10th floor. Even if he did get here first, he was not much faster. Just who injured Gong Zheng so heavily in such a short amount of time? The second woman asked. Her otherworldly voice was stern. The person who injured Gong Zheng is called Chen. At this moment, Chen had returned from the distance. His face was stern as he explained, Chen knows an extremely powerful secret technique. He shot a strand of finger-sized sword qi. It's extremely powerful and fast, specialized in targeting the souls of people. It can catch people off guard. Gong Zheng was injured by this secret technique. Afterwards, Chen told the three people some basic information, including the fact that Xiao Man, who was protected by the world, was with Chen. He did not hide that fact. After witnessing the might of the profound sword qi, Chen had truly seen Chen's strength. He knew it was impossible for him to handle Chen alone. As a result, he needed to work with other supreme god kings. That person's secret technique is indeed very powerful to injure Gong Zheng so much from a single strike. However, the more powerful a secret technique is, the greater its cost. As a result, I can deduce that he can't use this secret technique many times. As long as we're careful, it's not impossible to dodge it, the man among the three supreme god kings said with a firm voice. No matter how powerful that person called Chen is, we have to stop him and take back the girl. However, Chen isn't easy to deal with either. Let's work together, suggested the woman who spoke first. She looked towards the other two people who had come with her and Chen. Sure. Once we get the girl, we can share the secret on her together, said the man. Very soon, the four of them reached an agreement to work together. They shot off in Chen's direction in pursuit. During this time, more and more people joined in. Not only were there several regular god kings, but another 3 supreme god kings from the god king's throne had come as well. As a result, the supreme god kings who pursued Chen and Kaya increased time and time again, until there were 7 of them. Chapter 2083, A Battle to the Last Drop of Blood. Moreover, the supreme god kings who arrived later brought with them some news. Not only did many people on the 10th floor learn about the girl protected by the world, but even the experts on the 11th floor had learned of this news as well. The news directly spread towards the 12th floor. In short, Xiao Man's existence had shaken up the entire Neptunian divine palace. The more regular god kings who did not possess particularly outstanding strength eyed the chaotic prime's legacy and all the god-tier heavenly resources on Chen. As for the supreme god kings, they all targeted Xiao Man. The fact that Xiao Man was able to receive the protection of the world prompted many thoughts in all the supreme god kings as they all reached various possible conclusions. Chen and Kaya finally escaped from the 9th floor under the pursuit of so many god kings and returned to the 8th floor. The 8th floor was a huge world of volcanoes. Below them was an endless stretch of volcanoes and red-hot lava that formed oceans. They radiated with terrifying heat. The lava was so hot that it could easily melt supreme quality saint artifacts. Even some god artifacts of poorer quality would not be able to last for too long in the lava. It was extremely terrifying. Pieces of black rocks of various sizes floated in the lava like islands. They never melted nor did they sink, enduring the terrifying heat of the lava the entire time. These black rocks were god-tier materials, perlite ore, and they were high-quality god-tier materials. They were extremely valuable, enough for countless people to grow envious over, but no one was able to even take away a tiny piece of it, supreme god kings included. Right now, we only have one path of retreat, and that's the sea of lava. Chen hovered in the air as he stared at the lava sternly. The lava was extremely terrifying, hot enough to burn worlds. When his chaotic body was still at the 11th layer, he could not approach the sea of lava at all. All he could do was look at it from afar. Now, even after reaching the 12th layer, he still did not have complete confidence that his body would be able to endure the might of the lava. Quick, enter the tower. The tower should be able to keep us safe in the lava. Chen immediately took out the Inata tower. Under his control, it suddenly expanded and hovered in the air. Its broken door opened as he urged Kaya. Kaya knew that time was tight, so she did not hesitate at all. She immediately wanted to enter the tower. However, at this moment, a terrifying pulse of energy appeared behind her. A huge pole extended from the distance, where it was several dozen kilometers long as it smacked towards Chen with terrifying force. A supreme god king had come down from the 9th floor to the 8th floor and had attacked Chen without any hesitation at all. God artifact. Chen's face changed slightly as he recognized the long pole to be a god artifact as well in a single instance. Moreover, due to the fact that the wielder was a true supreme god king, the might of the god artifact had completely exceeded Mr. Shu's cataclysmic onyx wind fan. Chen was stern. He circulated his chaotic force as he suddenly stabbed out to block the pole. Boom! With that, Chen's body shook violently. The force in the pole was far greater than he had imagined. Right now, he only felt his entire right arm grow numb as a supreme power moved through his arm and spread through his body. He felt like all his bones were about to shatter. Suddenly, an azure streak of light shot over. A flying sword shot towards Kaya with a long, azure tail of light. Following the sword were 5 other powerful attacks that targeted Chen and Kaya. The 7 supreme god kings had already come down from the 9th floor, and they struck out mercilessly. Behind the 7 of them was a great group of god kings with various strength. They surged in all directions, tightly enclosing Chen and Kaya. Chen became extremely grim. The attacks of these supreme god kings were just too powerful. Even with the chaotic body, he needed to avoid these people as opponents, not to mention that there were even people among them with god artifacts. However, he could not flee or avoid them in the current situation. Without any other choice, he moved the Inata tower before him to block the attacks. Boom! With a deafening rumble, the attacks of the supreme god kings all landed on the Inata tower. The terrifying storm of energy caused the lava below to churn as many volcanoes in the surroundings immediately erupted. The Inata tower stood unwavering in the sky, without moving at all. The attacks of the supreme god kings were indeed very terrifying, but they were nowhere close to shaking the Inata tower. Get in there! Chen called out. The situation was urgent right now, so he grabbed Kaya by the shoulder forcefully and tossed her in there. The 7 supreme god kings had already approached him now, and they surrounded Chen. Every single one of them radiated with tremendously terrifying presences that surged into the sky. They were extremely powerful. Chen, we only want the girl. If you hand over the girl, there won't be any trouble for you, said a woman among the 7 people. Her voice was cold and possessed an irrefutable sense of prestige. The 7 of them maintained a certain distance from Chen as they all remained cautious and vigilant inside. Clearly, they were preparing themselves for Chen's profound sword chi. However, the 7 people were not on the same side. They were not a united group. When the woman spoke, a black-clothed, cold-faced man swung his black metal pole from several kilometers away. The pole suddenly expanded by 10 kilometers and struck towards Chen mercilessly with the might of a god artifact and surging energy. A member of our Bai clan was killed in the divine medicinal garden. Whether this person hands over the girl or not, he will die, the pole-wielding man said coldly with killing intent. A cold light flickered through Chen's eyes. He did not use the Inata tower to block the strike. Instead, he used the second strand of profound sword chi without any hesitation at all. As soon as the profound sword chi appeared, it turned into a blinding streak of white light as it shot towards the man with terrifying sword intent that was enough to shake up the world. As soon as the profound sword chi appeared, the supreme god kings showed angst. Even though it was not directed towards them, they did not dare to be careless. They could not help but retreat even further away from the several kilometers they maintained from Chen initially. Tsang Ying, who had personally witnessed the might of the profound sword qi, showed even more fear. With a flash, he instantly retreated to over 100 kilometers away. The eyes of the man with the poles suddenly narrowed while his god artifact that targeted Chen changed its trajectory in that instance. He wanted to disperse the profound sword qi as he retreated. However, the profound sword qi was just too fast. Distance seemed to be non-existent before it, where even though they were separated by several kilometers, it seemed like he was only inches away for the profound sword qi, which was nothing at all. His metal pole was unable to block it in time. At that critical moment, a suit of armor appeared on the man, covering his body completely. This was a supreme quality saint artifact. He wanted to block the profound sword qi with that. However, the profound sword qi was no regular sword qi. It was a sword technique the old master of the sword spirits created, and it was one that had reached the peak of god tier. It borrowed from the mysteries of the world, condensed from the laws of the sword combined with human vitality, so its way of damaging people was different. It directly ignored the saint artifact and punched through his armor and into his soul. Arg! The man could not help but wail out as his soul suffered unimaginable damage at that moment. He directly fell out of the sky as he endured the excruciating pain in his soul. Just when the man was about to fall into the lava, a god king from the Bai clan flew over from behind and caught him. What a terrifying secret technique! Aside from Tsang Ying, the 5 other supreme god kings all experienced chills. The profound sword qi was far more terrifying than they had imagined it to be. Chapter 2084, Falling into the Lava. Chen also tottered. He had experienced battle after battle, and now, he had shot out 2 strands of profound sword qi as well, greatly depleting the power of his soul. The dizziness in his head became stronger. Suddenly, a terrifying dark whirlwind swept in. As terrifying wind blades, it revolved around Chen, slicing bone-deep wounds on his body. Mr. Shu had also come down to the 8th floor. He stood in the distance as he used the origin energy he had just managed to recover to power the cataclysmic onyx wind fan. He took advantage of the situation to attack Chen as he called out at the same time, Chen is already very weak. I'm certain that he can't use a 3rd strand of that sword qi, so why don't you attack him? Mr. Shu naturally hoped that Chen could die there. The battle prowess he had displayed was just too terrifying, where it sent chills down Mr. Shu's spine. He would definitely become a huge problem for the Sky Empire. The 6 supreme god kings all struck out together to kill Chen. Energy pulses swept out in the surroundings, creating huge waves in the lava below and causing it to splash in the sky. Many volcanoes erupted and spurted with lava and fire divine crystals. In that instance, Chen became heavily injured. Blood spurted out of his mouth as mist, filling the sky. If it were not for his chaotic body, he probably would have died long ago. Arg! Chen bellowed out as his hair fluttered without any wind. He seemed to have gone mad as he unleashed his full strength, fighting the 6 opponents all by himself. He had no time to enter the Anata Tower at all under the pincer attacks of the 6 supreme god kings. He wanted to use the Anata Tower against his opponents, but the tower was still sealed up by the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt, so its powers were limited. It would be of some use against the formations in the Divine Medicinal Garden, but against powerful and experienced supreme god kings, it struggled to pose a real threat. Heavens, 6 supreme god kings are working together against him, yet he is still managing to last for a while, without dying immediately. Chen is just far too tenacious. Even if Chen dies here in this battle, his name will be remembered by many people. In the surroundings, several hundred god kings witnessed this brutal battle. They all could not help but gasp and feel extremely great shock. Chen was soaked in blood while the wounds on his body were vicious and terrifying. His chest had been pierced, leaving behind a visible hole through his body. He was heavily injured. Spurt. A sword stabbed out with lightning speed and into Chen's waist, penetrating his body completely. At the same time, Chen used his sword to stab a Supreme God King's throat, almost cutting his head off. Chen was unable to escape against the encirclement of the 6 Supreme God Kings. He could only engage in a battle to the death. Chen unleashed all the potential in his body when he faced such dire straits. His battle performance was extraordinary, injuring all 6 Supreme God Kings. Suddenly, an evil presence radiated from Chen. Chen's pupils had actually become blood red at a certain moment, where even his black hair turned red at a visible rate. It was like it had been dyed by blood. Chen had been repeatedly injured. Coupled with the depletion of the power of his soul, he finally was unable to suppress the evil power any longer. It replaced his consciousness and took over his body, causing him to lose his mind. Immediately, a ruthless, destructive presence began to radiate from Chen as a faint layer of red mist circulated around him. The presence was so evil that it caused the expressions of many of the surrounding God Kings to change. Even the 6 Supreme God Kings became grim. After losing his mind, Chen had clearly become even more terrifying. He did not feel pain, nor did he fear death. He was like a god of death that only knew how to destroy and kill. The blood-red mist around him controlled an extremely evil power as he fought everyone around him. He can actually devour my origin energy and power of laws. How is this possible? What is this evil power? It can even devour the power of laws. This shouldn't be possible. The 6 Supreme God Kings all cried out when they fought Chen who had lost his mind. Surprise filled their faces. Naturally, they did not know that after losing his mind, Chen seemed to have become the evil spirit. Hence, the power he used was naturally the evil spirit's. The evil spirit was also known as the crisis of the world. It was born to destroy and devour all things, including the laws of the world and worlds themselves. It was extremely terrifying. Quick, use your full strength and kill him. A Supreme God King called out. The evil power that Chen used right now made all of them shiver. Immediately, the 6 of them struck out with their full force at the same time. Coupled with Mr. Shu's assistance from one side, Chen was struck out of the sky, directly falling into the lava below. In the end, he was swallowed up by the red-hot lava. However, the 6 of them had paid a certain price as well. The mindless Chen had injured all of them, and they had all been reduced to horrible shapes as they suffered from wounds of various degrees. The Inata tower in the air that lost Chen's control began to fall out of the sky as well. A gleam of light flashed through Tsang Ying's eyes as he looked at the tower. He arrived beside it in a flash in an attempt to take it away. However, his face changed very quickly. The Inata tower was just too heavy. Not only was his strength not enough to stop it from falling, but he was even dragged down towards the lava as well. Tsang Ying knew that Kaya and Xiao Man were in the Inata tower. Once the tower fell into the lava, it would be impossible for him to learn the secret technique of using laws from Kaya. Immediately, he called out, "Quick, stop this tower from falling. The girl you want is in this tower. Don't let it fall in." The 5 other Supreme God Kings did not hesitate at all, arriving below the tower in a flash. They pressed their hands against the bottom in an attempt to stop it from falling. However, the outcome surprised them all. Just the weight of the tower alone made the Supreme God Kings feel like they could not fight it. Despite the combined efforts of the 6 Supreme God Kings, they still failed to stop the Inata tower from falling. Instead, they were pressed down towards the lava. Just what kind of god artifact is this tower? How is it so heavy? The complexions of the Supreme God Kings changed in shock. As they watched the lava grow closer and closer, they could only give up without any other choice, flying out from below the tower. In the end, the damaged tower fell into the churning lava under everyone's gazes. No one could stop it. We've spent so much effort to kill Chen, yet I never thought it'd all be for nothing. We got nothing from it at all. The 6 God Kings hovered in the air and stared at the churning lava blankly as they sighed. The lava below was extremely terrifying. Let alone them, but even infinite primes would not dare to enter it. It could melt weaker god artifacts, so in their eyes, there was no hope of retrieving the Inata tower once it had fallen in. They even believed that the tower would melt and become a part of the lava before too long. As for Chen, they had already beaten him into the lava, so they were all certain that Chen was dead, with no chance of him surviving at all. Sigh. Chen only became a god king recently, yet he can match the supreme god kings from the god king's throne. If he had some more time and reached late god king, would he still have any opponents among god kings? Yeah. If Chen was a peak god king, he could probably challenge first place on the god king's throne. Killing infinite primes would not even be a problem. Chen is far too powerful. Including Gongzheng, there were a total of 8 supreme god kings, yet 2 of them suffered heavy injuries to their souls, while the remaining 6 suffered injuries of various degrees as well. A supreme god king who has yet to truly rise up died just like this. What a pity. What a pity. Although the battle on the 8th floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace had ended, the god kings around refused to leave. They all stared at where Chen had fallen into the lava as they shook their heads and sighed. Chen was already dead. In their eyes, this was an indisputable fact. Even though they did not see his corpse, and no one personally saw his soul being wiped out, it was impossible for him to survive once he fell into the lava. In the distance, the 5th prince of the Sky Empire was overjoyed. Finally, the matter occupying his mind had vanished. As for Yun Xian, she entered a low period of silence. She was depressed. The god kings of the Yun family also stared at where Chen had fallen as they sighed in pity inside. Chen had just become a god king, yet he could fight supreme god kings. This unrivaled battle prowess was supposed to make its way across the saint's world and make him a resplendent star that shook up the entire world, where he would be revered. However, he experienced a battle of completely different cultivation levels, and he died in the end, which all made them feel pity. Before long, more supreme god kings arrived on the 8th floor. After learning about what had happened, many of them sighed, feeling pity for the death of a prodigy like Chen. The Neptunian Divine Palace had a total of 12 floors. The highest was the 12th floor, and it was also the most important place in the entire place. This was because the 4 grand primes of the Daoist sect of Neptunia had all left their legacies on the 12th floor. The 12th floor was a place that everyone was eager to go to, but it was also a place countless people feared and would shy away from. Even some supreme god kings felt very deep fear towards the 12th floor and would not set foot there easily. It was not because of how many terrifying traps of death were there, but because every time the Neptunian Divine Palace opened, terrifyingly powerful supreme god kings would go there. Even infinite primes might die before these god kings. Before these people, even other supreme god kings would be placed under tremendous pressure, where they would not be willing to face them. The 12th floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace was an idyllic world of water and mountains. However, the entire world was gloomy now, where only a huge, full moon hung in the sky, shining with clear and gentle moonlight. 4 statues several hundred meters tall stood there. Every single one of them depicted a grand prime from the Daoist sect of Neptunia in the past. At the same time, the 4 statues symbolized 4 great legacies. Across the countless years, one of the 4 legacies had been taken away, so one of the statues was dull and no longer gave off any pulses of energy, unlike the 3 other stone statues that were covered by a layer of hazy light as they pulsed with powerful energy. Around the statues sat over 100 god kings. All of their eyes were closed, and they meditated like monks in an attempt to form a connection with the statues and gain their recognition for the Grand Prime's legacy. Not all of these people were supreme god kings from the god king's throne. There were also some regular god kings who took the risk and endured the tremendous mental pressure to stay there. They wanted to be blessed by the world and gain the favor of the grand primes of the Daoist sect of Neptunia so that they could gain the legacy and rise up. I've just received news that a girl appeared on the 9th floor. She's not strong, only at the mortal realm, but apparently, she gained the protection of the world, where god kings are unable to harm her at all. At this moment, a piece of news rang out through the 12th floor, causing many god kings on the floor to open their eyes. I've never heard about someone gaining the protection of the world after entering the Neptunian Divine Palace. Something happened in the Neptunian Divine Palace just then, where the Neptunian moon that had vanished for a very long time appeared again. Now that a girl has received the protection of the world, are these two matters related? Countless years ago, a supreme expert foretold that when the Neptunian moon reappears, something big will happen to the Neptunian Divine Hall, except even that supreme expert struggled to foretell what it would be and whether it would be good or bad. Right now, when something is about to happen to the Neptunian Divine Palace, a girl becomes protected by the world. Surely the major change to the Neptunian Divine Palace is related to the girl. A discussion broke out on the 12th floor. Many god kings analyzed it and reached various conclusions. However, this clearly was not enough to raise the attention of everyone present. There were still over a dozen people who did not move at all after hearing the news. They remained seated there without moving at all. Among them was a god king who was completely covered in silver-white armor that only revealed her eyes. Although no one could see her face, it was quite evident that she was a female from the shape of her body. Although the woman did not give off any pressure at all, she gave off a cold presence that made everyone nearby shiver. No one could approach her. As a result, a range of several dozen meters around her was empty. No one dared to stay there. It said that an extremely impressive supreme prodigy appeared on the 9th floor. Not only did he harvest a quarter of all the heavenly resources in the divine medicinal garden, but the girl protected by the world was taken by him as well. Moreover, he had only become a god king recently, yet he could rival supreme god kings on the god king's throne. He even injured them. When this news rang out, it immediately caused a disturbance on the 12th floor. Many people showed disbelief, and even some supreme god kings on the god king's throne showed doubt. This was just too astonishing, to be able to fight supreme god kings while only having become a god king recently. It would even be described as frightful to the ear, so naturally, many people refused to believe it. You don't believe it? This is completely true. It has already spread like wildfire on the floors below. It's said that this person is called Chen, a completely unknown name. Before he became a god king, he unleashed his might in the divine medicinal garden and slaughtered many god kings. Now that he has broken through, his strength became even more astonishing. He completely had the power to challenge supreme god kings, making him extremely terrifying. Chapter 2086, The Mysterious Woman, Jian. Who's that? Why have I never heard of him before? And that name doesn't seem to be on the Overgod's plaque. Many people memorized Chen's name, except all of them found it to be extremely unfamiliar. However, when the woman in silver-white armor seated on the ground heard the name, her body trembled inconspicuously. Her eyes snapped open as a sliver of shock appeared in her cold eyes. Chen. Is it him? Has he also come to the saints' world and entered the Neptunian Divine Palace? Impossible. It can't be him. Only so long has passed, so how has he reached such a great level? The woman struggled to remain calm. Her heart churned. Afterwards, she stared at the person who spoke and asked in a cold and emotionless voice, "Does this Chen comprehend the laws of the sword?" The God King was stared at by the woman from a very long way away, and he immediately felt chills run down his spine as if his blood had frozen. Immediately, he did not dare to tarry, telling her in a hurry, "That's right. According to what I know, this Jian did indeed comprehend the laws of the sword." However, his truly powerful aspect was not the laws of the sword, but the extremely great power he controlled. This power eliminated his difference with supreme god kings, allowing him to fight them despite only having become a god king recently. An extremely great power? Is it really him? After hearing that, a gleam of light flashed through the woman's eyes as she became surprised and doubtful. Afterwards, she stood up from the ground, and under the fearful gazes of many god kings, she left the 12th floor. So scary. Who is that woman? She just glanced at me, and it sent chills running down my spine. Even my blood stopped flowing smoothly. The god kings wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead as he felt lingering fear after the woman had left. The woman in silver-white armor moved extremely quickly. She directly made her way to the 9th floor, and after spending a moment there, she made her way to the 8th floor, to the world of volcanoes. She concealed her presence and moved around silently like a ghost. Many people failed to sense her arrival. Only when she appeared where Chen had fallen into the lava did she raise the attention of everyone present. This was because it was difficult for her to not become the center of attention at that moment. The lava on the 8th floor was extremely hot. God Kings could only hover several thousand meters above it, and they would never descend any lower. Even the 6 supreme God Kings who fought Chen were only able to descend to an altitude of over 30 meters. Any lower and even they would not be able to withstand the terrifying heat. However, the woman directly approached the surface of the lava right now. Her feet were only 3 inches from the terrifying lava, making it seem like she was standing there from afar, completely unafraid of the terrifying heat. This sight shocked all the God Kings gathered in the area. The supreme God Kings who had fought with Chen did not leave either. They all stared at the snow-white figure who seemed to stand on the lava below in shock as disbelief flooded their faces as well. Who is she? At that moment, the entire 8th floor fell dead silent. Everyone stared at the figure as they thought of the same thing. This person is so powerful, where she can directly approach the surface of the lava. Looking at how confident she seems, it is clearly extremely easy for her to do that. Is she a primordial realm expert? People conversed secretly in great shock. Impossible. Primordial realm experts can't enter the Neptunian divine palace. The woman did not even glance at the God Kings above. She stood where Chen had fallen in as if she was standing on the lava. Her feet were only 3 inches away from the churning lava as she stared below without blinking at all. It was like she was looking through the lava in search of something. Only after 4 hours did she give up on her search. She thought, Chen, I know you're still alive. It's impossible for you to die here, or you would not have the right to become a successor of a grand exalt from the immortals world. I will look for you when you appear again. The woman suddenly vanished silently, leaving no traces behind. Just like when she came, she left without anyone noticing. No one noticed how she had left either. She was truly like a ghost. So powerful. Her strength must have reached an astonishing level, Zhang said sternly as he floated in the sky. The woman from before clearly did not give off any pressure, but he felt extremely pressured, and it made him shiver as if he faced a primordial realm expert. Who is she? She's so powerful. Is she ranked in the top 3 of the God King's throne, or maybe she even holds first place? Or, she has never attempted the God King's throne, so she never left her name on there? Another Supreme God King said. They were all so grim. They all knew every single name on the God King's throne very well, but it was only the names. Their grasp over the other information was limited. Only with Supreme God Kings who often made public appearances and were extremely well known would they be able to identify them through their unique physical features, or even their cultivation method and personality. No one knew the identity of the woman who had appeared just then. Even from her unique features, it was difficult to tell. This was because they did not know the gender of many of the names engraved on the God King's throne. In the current Saints world, many major organizations outside the Neptunian Divine Palace had learnt that the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace had awakened. This news immediately interested the people in charge of many powerful organizations because the awakening of the artifact spirit meant that a new master for the Neptunian Divine Palace would be chosen. Not only was the Neptunian Divine Palace a high-quality god artifact, but there were items that even powerful organizations that stood at the very apex of the world coveted in there. As a result, as soon as the news broke out, all the major organizations got into action. They basically sent all their talented God Kings rushing to the Neptunian Divine Palace. Some of the supreme God Kings on the God King's throne that belonged to an organization were called on by their respective clans or sects, and they were all sent into the Neptunian Divine Palace. The current Neptunian Divine Palace had truly become a gathering place of experts. The fight among the Supreme God Kings had become the center of attention of all major organizations. This was because the opening of the Neptunian Divine Palace was not as simple as a fight for Grand Prime's legacies. It was a battle for the ownership of a divine hall that tied into many matters. This was all because the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace had awakened. As a result, basically half of all the supreme god kings on the God King's throne had headed into the Neptunian Divine Palace. The Godnigma Plain was a rather well-known plain out of the 49 of the Saints' world because it was where the God clan stood. It was also where the headquarters of the God clan was located. The entire plain was under the God clan's rule, where even though there were many forces that were not a part of the God clan, they still followed the God clan. This was because the God clan was a peak clan in the Saints' world. They were once the undisputed most powerful clan and organization in the entire Saints' world when the war god was still alive. Even though the war god had died, the God clan was still extremely glorious and did not decline. Not only was all this because of their extensive heritage, but there was another more important reason, and that was war gods would appear one after another. When the war god of one generation died, a new war god would be born after several tens of thousand years or over 1,000,000 years. This would continue onwards. No one knew how many generations of war gods there had been. Moreover, there would only be a single war god with each generation, where there would never be two war gods coexisting at the same time. Right now, within the majestic war god hall within the headquarters of the God clan, a burly young man with golden skin sat high up on the central throne. Below him, over a dozen members of the God clan of various ages had gathered. They all stood there politely. These people were the upper echelon of the God clan. They possessed great status and authority. Outside, they would all be considered as supreme experts who could reign over a major region. However, every single of them were well behaved as they stood below the burly young man who was clearly not even at the primordial realm. If Chen were present, he would definitely recognize the young man with a single glance. He was the friend that he had gone through thick and thin with, who he had not seen for many years, Tai Ta. Although Tai Ta still had not reached the primordial realm, the God clan was unique. His bloodline from the warring gods clearly gave him a status that did not match up to his personal strength at all. He had become the king of the God clan, the leader of the clan, where he possessed absolute authority. Any slight action from him could shake up the Saints' world. Your Majesty, the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace has awakened, and it is about to gain a new master. I was wondering whether our God clan should take part or not. A middle-aged man below Tai Ta clasped his hands and said politely. In our God clan, who are the most powerful God kings? Tai Ta sat on the throne as he said in a dignified manner. Our God clan currently occupies 3 ranks on the God King's throne. The strongest is still Adriana. Adriana has already recovered her body, and although she has not reached the primordial realm yet, the 3 million years she spent in the lower world allowed her strength to become even greater, an old man said below. Summon Adriana for me. You are all dismissed, said Tai Ta. Yes, Your Highness. The people in the hall all bowed before leaving as quickly as possible. In the blink of an eye, only Tai Ta was left seated on the throne within the entire hall. Before long, a beautiful woman in a green dress made her way into the war god hall politely. She only seemed to be in her 20s. Adriana greets Your Majesty. Adriana dropped to one knee and lowered her head towards Tai Ta. This woman was the greatest god king of the God clan. She was the one who had her body destroyed by Shui Yunlan, only leaving her soul behind, which transformed into the elven god tree from her brimming vitality in the lower world, Adriana. Adriana was the person who received the current war god, having waited over 3 million years painstakingly before taking the current war god up to the Saints' world. At the same time, when the Tianyuan clan faced the crisis of the world, and they were just about to all be destroyed, it was Adriana who had stepped forward, sacrificing 30% of her vitality to stop the crisis and make time for Chen and the others. Only then did Chen completely destroy the crisis with the assistance of the various experts of the world of Forsaken Saints. It could even be said without any exaggeration that it was all because of Adriana that everything in the Tianyuan continent's world was still alive right now. Otherwise, even with the primordial god Silk, Chen would not have been able to eliminate the evil spirit completely. The final outcome would have been the destruction of the world, where both the four great races and the world of forsaken saints would have gone extinct. Now, Adriana had recovered her body that Shui Yunlan had destroyed after returning to the god clan in the saints' world. Not only was she back at peak condition, but the time she had spent in the lower world had even allowed her strength to become far greater than the past. When Tai Ta looked at Adriana, his gaze became gentle. He would never forget the assistance that Adriana had provided to him back on the Tian Yuan continent. Even though Tai Ta had become the supreme king of the god clan now, possessing unrivaled authority, he still remembered the kindness that Adriana had shown in the past. Adriana, do you still remember that brother of mine from the lower world? Tai Ta asked Adriana. Your Majesty, are you talking about Chen? He possesses unprecedented talent and is an astonishing prodigy. I naturally remember him, said Adriana. When she thought of Chen back on the Tian Yuan continent, she could not help but sigh in amazement. Chen's talent was so great that describing it as unprecedented would not be an exaggeration. Even Adriana admired it very much as the greatest god king of the god clan and someone who had seen the many prodigies of the saints' world. Memories flashed through Tai Ta's eyes as his face became filled with reminiscence. He said, Chen and I are brothers for life, but ever since coming to the saints' world, I've lost all contact with him. I don't have any news about him either. However, with my brother's talent and capability, even if he still hasn't come to the saints' world, it'll probably be soon. Or maybe he's already somewhere in the saints' world. Adriana, as the only person in the current god clan that has seen my brother, I'll leave the mission of searching for my brother up to you, Tai Ta said sternly. Your Majesty, since you want to know Chen's whereabouts, why not ask the Hall elders to try to predict it? With their abilities, predicting Chen's whereabouts is nothing difficult, said Adriana. The Hall elders were figures that held great authority in the god clan. Every single one of them possessed extremely terrifying cultivations. They were all people who stood at the apex of the world. Tai Ta shook his head, there's no need to trouble the Hall elders. I'm worried that they'll find out about even more information. Adriana, go find Chen personally. Handle this by yourself and don't bring anyone else with you. Do not disclose the two swords on Chen to anyone in the god clan either. Tai Ta paused before continuing. I know that the saints' world is vast and finding my brother is 1,000 times more difficult than finding a needle in a haystack. However, the artifact spirit of the Neptunian divine palace has awakened now, and the talents of various organizations will be gathering there. You can go to the Neptunian divine palace first to get to know them and use the power they can supply to search for my brother. You need to make them all understand that Chen is an esteemed guest of my god clan. With the clan's prestige, I believe that all the people who learn of this will take good care of Chen once they meet him. As for the secret of the two swords, I can tell that they're related to major matters from how he asked me to keep it a secret in the lower world. He probably is keeping it a secret. Of course, if you find out that the secret of the two swords has been exposed, execute everyone who knows without hesitation before the secret spreads. Tai Ta ordered Adriana seriously. Yes, Adriana understands what to do. Adriana departed with the orders. She left the Godnigma place with the trust of the king of the god clan and began to search for Chen. Due to Tai Ta's orders, Adriana set out all by herself, without bringing anyone with her. Otherwise, there would be a great group of guards wherever she went as the greatest god king of the god clan. There would even be primordial realm experts who would follow her secretly. Clearly, Tai Ta already knew what Chen's twin swords represented, but this did not affect their relationship. His arrangements this time were also to prevent members of the god clan apart from himself and Adriana from approaching his brother and discovering the existence of the twin swords. Chapter 2088. The Daoist sect of Divine Sound. The Skyfire Plain was a relatively well-known place in the Saints' world out of the 49 Great Plains. Compared to the Cloud Plain, the Skyfire Plain was on a separate level both in terms of overall strength and renown. This was because the Skyfire Plain had once given birth to a famed expert. This person's cultivation neared the peak of perfection and was so powerful that she was an existence that could make the expression of all the grand primes in the past change whenever she was mentioned. Not only was she known as one of the most powerful people below Grand Exalt in the past, but her grasp over the way of music had reached an unbelievable level. She used the zither of the demonic cry that was renowned throughout the saints' world, creating the two tunes of the demonic and divine. With the divine tune, the zither of the demonic cry could conduct the mysteries of the world and intervene with the functions of the laws of the world. With the demonic tune, the zither of the demonic cry could enchant the souls of all living things and kill unknowingly. It could control the minds of grand primes, or even make their expressions change when they heard it. No one knew the name of this supreme expert. They only knew that she came from the divine sect of divine sound of the Skyfire plane and was known as the third ancestor. Her name had shaken up the saints' world, and she was a superpower that stood at the peak of the saints' world. And because of her existence, the Daoist sect of divine sound became the greatest organization on the Skyfire plane, possessing an extremely great status. However, good things never lasted. After the third ancestor died over 3 million years ago, the Daoist sect of divine sound lost the right to hold that name. It was replaced by other organizations. This was because the glory of the sect was brought on by the third ancestor alone. Without her, not only did the Daoist sect of divine sound lose the right to hold that name with their heritage, but a certain distance even existed between it and the other peak organizations of the Skyfire plane. However, even with that being the case, the Daoist sect of divine sound possessed a certain amount of status on the Skyfire plane. They were one of the large organizations there. Even though the current Daoist sect of divine sound had fallen from the pedestal of the greatest organization, they still received the respect of many peak organizations on the plane due to the influence of the third ancestor when she was still alive. Right now, a perfect beauty in a purple dress who seemed even prettier than goddesses sat on the peak of a mountain shrouded by mist. It was a picturesque scene. The woman only seemed to be in her 20s. Not only was her appearance so beautiful that it was enough to suffocate people, but her otherworldly presence made her seem like a goddess who did not tamper with mortal affairs. Her enchanting eyes were fixed on the zither placed across her knees. With her close concentration, she played a beautiful tune as her slender hands pulled the strings gently. This beautiful woman was Shangguan Mu'er. Due to the zither of the demonic cry, Shangguan Mu'er had shaken up the entire upper echelon of the Daoist sect of divine sound. She had even alerted the ancestors of the sect who had been in seclusion for several hundreds of thousand years, causing them to emerge as soon as possible. This was because the zither of the demonic cry was a treasure bound to the third ancestor's life. Ever since she died, the zither had vanished. As a result, when Shangguan Mu'er appeared in the sect with the zither of the demonic cry, the entire upper echelon believed she had received the legacy of the third ancestor right from the beginning. With the status as the successor of the third ancestor, Shangguan Mu'er possessed an extremely special and revered identity in the Daoist sect of divine sound. She had even received the personally nurturing of the ancestors, where her status was only second to the sect master. At this moment, an extremely handsome and graceful man appeared behind Shangguan Mu'er. The man was in white robes. He held a jade flute that had images of dragons and phoenixes carved into it. The man had arrived silently, standing several meters away as he stared at Shangguan Mu'er's back. Love and infatuation filled his eyes. Afterwards, the man placed the jade flute to his mouth elegantly and began to play it to Shangguan Mu'er's melody. He blew it gently. The man clearly possessed great mastery over music. As soon as he played the flute, it merged perfectly with the zither music, making it gentle and pleasant. It was music that penetrated the mind and could bring comfort to people from the bottom of their hearts. With a zither and a flute, the two musical instruments resonated with each other. Anyone would believe that they were a match made in heaven with a single glance, enough for anyone to feel admiration. However, this did not last. The moment the flute rang out, the zither suddenly stopped. Only the gentle, pleasant flute music rang out and echoed in the mountains. Shangguan Mu'er had stopped playing. She frowned. "Senior Kong, why have you come here?" Shangguan Mu'er's voice was cold and emotionless. It made her seem unapproachable. The man was called Jun Kong, and his master was one of the 4 ancestors of the Daoist sect of divine sound. His talent was astonishing. Not only was he a resplendent star in the sect, but he was also one of the supreme prodigies of the Skyfire plane. Moreover, Jun Kong had firmly embedded his name on the God King's throne 100 years ago, making him an undisputable supreme God King. Jun Kong did not continue playing his flute when he saw Shangguan Moor stop. He looked at her back gently as he said softly, "Junior Moor, why have you suddenly stopped? The scenery here is so beautiful, like heaven on earth. Why don't we play together and make this heavenly place even more charming with our way of sound? I like to be alone and not be disturbed by anyone." "Senior Kong, please return," Shangguan Moor said coldly without even looking back. Jun Kong did not leave. He stared at Shangguan Moor's back deeply. There were mixed feelings within his deep love. He sighed gently, "Junior Moor, ever since you came to the Daoist sect of divine sound, I've never seen you smile before. Your face is always sunken as if something is weighing on your heart. Are you unable to forget that person on the distant cloud plane? That's my problem." "There's no need for Senior Kong to worry," said Shangguan Moor. "Junior Moor, if you really are still thinking of that person, I can only persuade you to forget about him as soon as possible because I've already received news that this person called Jian Chen is dead. He died to the hands of the Empyrean demon cult, where his soul was wiped out," said Jun Kong. Shangguan Moor shuddered from that as she began to tremble uncontrollably. Her beautiful face paled, and after a moment of silence by herself, she murmured with a trembling voice, "Impossible. That's impossible. He can't have died. This news must be fake. Although I haven't left the Skyfire plane recently, I do know many descendants and disciples of large clans and sections. I've heard this from them, so it's completely true, without any falsehood at all," said Jun Kong. Chapter 2089, The Ancestors Summoning, Impossible. "That's impossible. It can't be true," Shangguan Moor shook her head gently. She was dejected as evident sorrow filled her face. Although she did not believe Jun King much at all, she could not help but think about when Jian Chen had gone missing during the battle between the Empyrean demon cult and the divine kingdom of Pingtian in the southern region of the Cloud Plain. The battle was undoubtedly intense. Even god kings that possessed supreme battle prowess in the divine kingdom of Pingtian could die. If god kings hunted down Jian Chen, given his strength as an over-god, it would truly be grim for him. He would face the danger of dying. Subconsciously, Shangguan Moor believed something that she did not wish to see had happened to Jian Chen in the battle between the divine kingdom of Pingtian and the Empyrean demon cult. Shangguan Moor closed her eyes painfully. She was in deep grief. Her mood seemed to affect the vegetation in the surroundings, causing the soft, green grass in the surroundings of the mountain peak to lose their luster at that moment as if they were grieving as well. "Junior Moor, you should forget about that person. Even if he was still alive right now, he's not worthy of you." Jun Kong stood beside Shangguan Moor and said softly as gentleness filled his eyes. He was secretly overjoyed. He had no idea who Jian Chen was, nor did he know anything about him. The news of Jian Chen's death before was a lie he had created. However, he had never thought it would affect Moor so much, almost to the point where she believed it to be true. "I never thought a lie I just made up on the spot would plant the impression that Jian Chen is dead in Junior Moor's heart. I believe Jian Chen's importance to Junior Moor will gradually decrease as time goes on until it becomes completely diluted. Yep, I better seize this opportunity and leave behind an impression of me in Junior Moor's heart," Jun Kong secretly celebrated. He had already begun planning how to nurture his relationship with Junior Moor in the next few days so that she had him in her heart. Shangguan Moor was talented, and her otherworldly presence was an irresistible temptation to ordinary men. Even Jun Kong, who held great status in the Daoist sect of divine sound and was loved by countless women, was deeply entranced by Shangguan Moor, falling in love with her at first sight. Moreover, Shangguan Moor had gained the basic recognition of the zither of the demonic cry, and she would become an existence who would succeed the third ancestor, so it made Jun Kong fall deeper in love with her. Suddenly, Shangguan Moor's face froze, and she suddenly opened her eyes. Her sorrow disappeared in an instant as a breathtaking light shone in her eyes. She murmured, "No, he's not dead. He's not dead. Chen is still alive. I can vaguely sense it. I can clearly sense he's somewhere distant." Shangguan Muer's voice was filled with joy. Jun Kong's face suddenly froze when he heard that. He stared at Shangguan Muer in disbelief. Looking at her excitement and joy, Jun Kong's face immediately warped in an ugly manner. At that moment before, he had just managed to plant the impression that Chen was dead in Shangguan Muer's heart. All he had to do was wait for this impression to grow, and she would completely forget about that person called Chen. However, he had never thought that while Shangguan Muer was grieving, she would sense Chen blurrily, immediately destroying his lie. At that moment, Jun Kong only felt furious. It reached quite an indescribable degree. So what if he's still alive? He's a person of a completely different world compared to us. He's not worthy of Junior Muer. Someone as puny as him probably can't even make it into our sect, Jun Kong could not help but add. He felt deep envy towards Chen as well as hidden resentment. He continued to scoff, let alone making it into our sect. He probably can't even come to the Skyfire Plane. The Skyfire Plane is nowhere close to the Cloud Plane. Senior Jun Kong, you can look down on all the people in the world, but you can't look down on him. If I have to speak seriously, it should be me who's not worthy of him, not him being unworthy of me. As long as he has some time, I believe there's basically nothing he can't do in this world. Shangguan Muer calmed down and said coldly. Isn't he just a mere overgod? Yet he's being praised like this by Junior Muer. I wonder if he has managed to leave his name on the overgod's plaque, said Jun Kong. The more Shangguan Muer praised Chen, the deeper his resentment for Chen became. The ancestors have once said that first place on the God King's throne does not make you invincible among God Kings, and first place on the overgod's plaque does not make you the best among all overgods because there are some extremely impressive prodigies who do not value fame. So they never attempt the overgod's plaque in the God King's throne, said Shangguan Muer. She paused there and glanced at Jun Kong before continuing. However, with Chen's talent, I believe he can definitely make it into the top 10 once he becomes a peak God King. Jun Kong's face sank. He was a supreme God King from the God King's throne. Even though he was ranked towards the bottom, he still took pride in it. Now that Shangguan Muer, someone he longed for, had told him to his face that the man she missed dearly was someone who could make it into the top 10 on the God King's throne, it was no different to a slap to his face. Jun Kong's handsome face paled in fury. Anger rose up inside him as his resentment towards Chen reached its limit. It looks like I have to eliminate this Chen to get Junior Muer. Jun Kong's eyes were cold as his heart was filled with killing intent. Jun Kong, Muer, come see me immediately. At this moment, an obscure voice seemed to pass through the fabric of space-time and rang out in Shangguan Muer and Jun Kong's heads. Jun Kong immediately revealed a polite expression when he heard that, while Shangguan Muer's expression became mixed. She felt gratitude towards the owner of the voice as well as discontent. Afterwards, the two of them left, heading straight into the depths of the Daoist sect of divine sound, a place that even core disciples could not set foot in. Within the forbidden grounds, there was a majestic divine hall that had 3 people seated in the air. Among the 3 people was a gray-haired old woman who seemed to be in her 20s, while the other 2 people were a man and a woman who seemed to be in their 30s. They kept their presences concealed right now, so they seemed extremely ordinary in appearance alone and were just like mortals. Disciple Jun Kong greets Master. Disciple Shangguan Muer greets the 3 ancestors. Shangguan Muer and Jun Kong stood politely below as they bowed. These 3 people were 3 of the 4 great ancestors of the Daoist sect of divine sound. They were the peak power of the sect. The 3 ancestors all looked at Shangguan Muer eagerly. Not only did they place all their hopes on Shangguan Muer, but even the wind ancestor who had been in seclusion for so long in an attempt to overcome a final bottleneck placed great hopes on her as well. This was because Shangguan Muer had gained the basic recognition of the zither of the demonic cry. If nothing went wrong, she would become the successor of the 3rd ancestor. Muer, has the artifact spirit of the zither of the demonic cry showed any signs of awakening? At this moment, the old woman seated in the center spoke. Her gaze was gentle and filled with care. Shangguan Moor shook her head gently and replied, Ancestor, the zither of the demonic cry remains the same as before. The old woman nodded gently and said, the zither of the demonic cry has been heavily damaged. Even though it seems fine on the surface, the artifact spirit is still slumbering. Awakening the artifact spirit will be difficult, and even if the artifact spirit does awaken, it'll be difficult for it to return to its peak condition in a short amount of time. Moor, we've summoned you here today because we remember a place that might assist the artifact spirit in awakening as quickly as possible. This place is the former divine hall of the Daoist sect of Neptunia, the Neptunian divine palace, said the old woman. Chapter 2090, The Ninth Disciple, 1. The man who seemed to be in his 30s said, Our Daoist sect of divine sound was once renowned throughout the saints' world due to the glory brought on by the third ancestor, but after she passed away, we've declined. Our current status is not even a fraction of what it was in the past. But Moor, your appearance has brought hope to our sect, allowing us to see that we will shake up the saints' world once again in the future. This is all because you've obtained the third ancestor's legacy. But if you want to inherit the legacy completely, the artifact spirit of the zither of the demonic cry must awaken completely, and then you can obtain the full legacy of the third ancestor from there. As a result, awakening the artifact spirit is the most important matter both to you and the entire sect. The man sighed gently when he reached there. He said powerlessly, however, there's nothing in our sect that can awaken the artifact spirit of the zither of the demonic cry. The only method we can think of right now is in the Neptunian divine palace. Moor. The third ancestor of the Daoist sect of divine sound, the woman who seemed to be in her 30s, looked at Shangguan Moor and said, the Neptunian divine palace opens once every 10,000 years, and it just happens to be open right now. Originally, we planned for you to go the next time it opened. We believed that with your talent and the unconditional support and nurturing of our sect, we could raise your strength to the level of Supreme God Kings in 10,000 years such that you would be without worries in the Neptunian divine palace. However, plans are never perfect. Now that the artifact spirit of the Neptunian divine palace has awakened, and a new master for the divine hall will be chosen, it'll probably be the last time the Neptunian divine palace opens. You cannot miss out on this opportunity. Ancestor, you want us to go to the Neptunian divine palace right now? Shangguan Moor asked. That's right. The Neptunian divine palace opens for a very short period each time, so if you want to make it in time, you need to use the teleportation formation across planes, said the central old woman. Then, she said to the two ancestors, Lian Qi, Gu Na, you know exactly how important Moor is to our Daoist sect of divine sound, so I'll leave the escorting up to you and your husband when you go to the Neptunian divine palace. Moreover, the Neptunian divine palace this time will be different. Many supreme prodigies will definitely be gathered in there. Although Moor has already become a god king from the sect's full support, she is still nowhere close to those supreme prodigies, so her safety in there will be handled by Jun Kong. With that, Jun Kong's face immediately lit up. He said in a hurry, please do not worry, master and ancestors. In the Neptunian divine palace, disciple, I will definitely keep Junior Moor safe to the best of my abilities. All right. With Jun Kong going in again, we don't need to worry about Moor's safety too much in the Neptunian divine palace, said the man. He was Lian Qi as well as Jun Kong's master, one of the four ancestors of the Daoist sect of divine sound. Let's not tarry and set off right now. Gu Na stood up and glanced at Lian Qi gently before immediately leaving in a group of 4. At the same time, there was a gloomy space that never saw daylight elsewhere. The environment there was horrid, filled with swamps and poisonous insects. There were even abnormally powerful magical beasts and life forms of other races that darted about like shadows. Bloody slaughter happened everywhere. Currently, there was a young man soaked in blood within a forest in that space. He engaged in an intense battle against a huge, golden ape that was 100 meters tall. He fought with great intensity, where each clash was like the collision of 2 huge meteorites. Deafening booms rang out with terrifying energy shockwaves. Whenever they clashed, it would carry an overwhelming amount of origin energy, leading to a destructive fight. The huge ape was covered in blood, where its thick, lustrous, golden fur had been dyed red by blood. It roared out furiously and struck out time and time again in a battle to the death against the young man. The battle lasted for several hours. In the end, the young man produced a huge strand of sword chi that pierced the golden ape's head, bringing the battle to a close. After the battle ended, the young man knelt on one knee as he gasped for air. He murmured, "I never thought ancient great apes would actually be so powerful. It was just a young gold ape king, yet it was so difficult to deal with despite being at the same cultivation level. I really wonder just how terrifying dark gold apes will be. It's already very impressive that you could defeat a gold ape king of the ancient great apes. However, unless you rank within the top 10 on the God King's throne, you're nowhere close to being the opponent of a dark gold ape king of the ancient great apes. That is because their bloodline is so powerful that it's only a tad weaker than the warring gods." A woman's voice rang out of nowhere at this moment, reverberating across the entire world. With that, the gloomy world suddenly distorted heavily. The entire world actually faded away at a visible rate before completely vanishing in the end. It was replaced by a huge, empty space. The young man soaked in blood stood within that huge space. Tremendous, unimaginable formations filled the surroundings, where every line of inscription glimmered like the stars in the sky. However, the energy pulses they gave off were enough to destroy worlds. Even in the saints' world, this was a formation that had reached the very peak. The gloomy space before and the golden great ape had been conjured by the formation. Even though the world was fake, the battle was real, so the young man's blood did actually drip from his body while his wounds were real as well. It's just a pity that dark gold ape kings haven't appeared for several million years. The woman's voice rang out once again with pity. This time, the origins of her voice were no longer undetectable anymore. It had clearly originated from behind the young man. Several hundred meters behind the young man, a woman who only seemed to be in her 20s stood there in a red dress. Although she seemed like a mortal, without giving off any presence of possessing cultivation, her bearing was otherworldly. She possessed a beauty that was capable of outshining even the moon. The bloodied young man looked at the woman and snickered. He clasped his hands towards the woman and said, "Greetings, 8th Senior. Although you were brought up by Senior Bisheng, you haven't been formally acknowledged as a disciple, so you're not exactly my junior. Clean yourself up immediately. Master wants to see you," the woman said to the young man before turning around and leaving. "Master wants to see me?" The young man blinked when he heard that. He wondered inside, "I've already been here for so long, but I've never seen Master. Let alone Master, I haven't seen anyone else apart from 8th Senior and that old man called Bisheng. Moreover, that old man is not even a person. He's an artifact spirit. That old man called Bisheng always praises how powerful Master is, but I've never seen Master before at all. I can finally see him now. If Master really is as powerful as that old man says he is, sending me back must be a piece of cake for him." Chapter 2091, The Ninth Disciple, 2. Before long, the young man had changed into a set of clean clothes. He put on snow-white robes and followed the woman in a red dress as he wandered inside. His wounds had recovered miraculously in that short amount of time, returning him to peak condition. The two of them remained silent along the way. In the end, the young man was brought into an extremely majestic hall under the lead of the woman. As soon as he entered the hall, the young man's heart suddenly shuddered. He studied the hall and showed a sliver of sternness. At that moment, he felt like he had arrived in a boundless universe as he stood in the hall, where he actually felt like he was insignificant. At the same time, there seemed to be a pressure that crushed down on his soul, causing it to tremble uncontrollably. Disciple by Rong greets Master. At this moment, the woman at the front dropped to the ground and bowed. Her voice was filled with respect. As for the young man, the tremendous presence of the hall seemed to steal his mind as soon as he entered the place. He had fallen into shock and became lost. Only when the woman's voice rang out did he suddenly snap back to his senses, immediately gazing over. To one end of the hall sat a figure on a throne. A thick layer of light conjured from laws radiated from the figure, causing the space to distort. It completely obscured the person's appearance, where even the person's body was reduced to a blur. This was what the young man had seen with his first glance. Just when he continued to study the person out of curiosity, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his eyes, forcing him to close them. Afterwards, his body directly dropped to his knees uncontrollably, astounding the young man. Disciple Ming Dong greets Master. The young man knelt on the ground as he brought his head down very low. He did not dare to raise his head to even glance at the person on the throne. He felt fear from his very soul when he faced the figure on the throne, where even his soul trembled. He firmly believed that even though he was no longer weak now, the person on the throne could kill him without attacking him at all. Just a glance would be enough. Unsurprisingly, the young man was Ming Dong, who had entered the 9th floor of the Inata Tower with Jian Chen, before being sent to the Saints' World by the projection of the heavenly palace of Bisheng. After arriving in the Saints' World, Ming Dong understood everything. He had been brought to the Saints' World all because of the handiwork of the heavenly palace of Bisheng's artifact spirit. Although the artifact spirit of the heavenly palace of Bisheng was located in the distant Saints' World, it possessed a connection with the projection on the 9th floor. After sensing Ming Dong's talent, it made a decision by itself to bring Ming Dong over through using up all the energy in the projection. Ming Dong, I still have not taken you in as a disciple, so calling me master is too soon, said the person on the throne. Their voice seemed to possess all the sounds in the world, making it impossible to tell whether they were male or female. There was only a sense of coldness and emotionlessness from the voice. However, you indeed have extraordinary talent with the laws of destruction. To be able to comprehend the laws of destruction to such a level in such a short amount of time, you indeed have the right to become my disciple. The figure continued emotionlessly with a dignified voice, I am the Inata Grand Prime, and I am willing to take you in as a formal disciple of mine today. Ming Dong, will you accept me as your master? Disciple is willing. Disciple Ming Dong greets Master. Ming Dong said politely. From today onwards, you are my 9th disciple, and you will inherit my way of destruction. Whether you can comprehend it to the limit will be up to your personal fortune, said the Inata Grand Prime. Extending a finger, a streak of light immediately shot into Ming Dong's forehead. Ming Dong quivered as he closed his eyes uncontrollably. The streak of light contained a tremendous amount of information. Even with the current strength of Ming Dong's soul, he was unable to digest it all in a short amount of time. After who knew how long, Ming Dong finally opened his eyes. He looked at the blurry Inata Grand Prime, who sat high up, and after hesitating for a while, he finally made up his mind, Master, Disciple has a request. Disciple knows that Master's abilities are boundless, so Disciple hopes that Master can send Disciple back to the world where Disciple came from because Disciple still has a friend that has gone through thick and thin with Disciple. Disciple hopes to take this brother to the Saints' World as well. I ask for your permission, Master. The brother you speak of is already in the Saints' World. If you want to find him, go to the Neptunian Divine Palace. By Rome, take your 9th junior there, said the Inata Grand Prime. Yes, Master. By Rome replied politely before leaving with Ming Dong. Ming Dong, on the other hand, had become lost. Some disbelief still lingered on his face. He had tried coming up with everything to return to the Tianyuan continent for Jian Chen, but he had never thought that he would learn that Jian Chen was already in the Saints' World from his master, the Inata Grand Prime. 8th Senior, how does Master know about my brother? And how does Master know that my brother has already come to the Saints' World? And how does Master know all this with so much certainty? Oh right, and what kind of place is the Neptunian Divine Palace? Ming Dong looked at Bai Rong in perplexion after leaving the hall. Bai Rong's expression did not change at all. She replied calmly, Master's cultivation realm has already reached an unbelievable level. Master stands supreme in this world, making Master an existence like the very laws of the world. All Master needs is a single thought, and Master can see through all the mysteries of the world, allowing Master to peer into both the past and the future. Learning where your brother is naturally a piece of cake. Whoa, Master is so powerful. In other words, in the entire Saints world, or even the myriad of lower worlds, Master can find anyone with a single thought no matter how far away they are, even if they are separated by thousands of worlds, right? Ming Dong asked in shock. That's true towards some weaker existences. However, if it's other grand primes, there'll be many difficulties in finding them even with Master's abilities because experts like that can hide their traces, said Bai Rong. After formally becoming a disciple, Ming Dong's status was completely different from before. Bai Rong answered all of his questions. However, Ming Dong had also learned a shocking piece of news from Bai Rong. Of the 9 great disciples of the Inata Grand Prime, 4 were already dead. Only the 1st senior sister, 3rd senior brother, 5th senior brother, and 8th senior sister remained. 8th senior, may I ask what kind of palace the Neptunian Divine Palace is? Ming Dong asked. As soon as he thought about how Chen was in there, he could not help but become emotional. He wanted to reunite with Chen immediately. The Neptunian Divine Palace hasn't been very peaceful recently. Probably almost half of the kiddos from the God King's throne have gone there, Bai Rong murmured sternly. Then she looked at Ming Dong and said, 9th Junior, since you want to go to the Neptunian Divine Palace, allow me to accompany you. The Neptunian Divine Palace this time will be quite a good chance for you to train and see the outside world. On the 8th floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace, Chen's body floated in the scorching lava that could melt even low-quality god artifacts. His entire body was covered in lava as he slowly sank towards the bottom. Right now, Chen was completely unconscious, so he had no idea that he currently faced unprecedented danger. The lava there was just too terrifying. Even items as tough as god artifacts could be broken down, let alone Chen's body. Even though he had already reached the 12th layer of the chaotic body, his body was only as tough as supreme quality saint artifacts if his defenses were pushed to the maximum. Naturally, he was unable to keep himself safe in the lava. Moreover, he was currently unconscious. His body was not pumped full with chaotic force, so the defenses of his chaotic body had not been pushed to the maximum. As a result, in under 10 seconds of falling into the lava, his body had already been charred black. All of his skin had cracked completely. After Chen spent 15 seconds in the lava, his body began to disintegrate away slowly, turning into ash and becoming a part of the red-hot lava. Moreover, as time went on, Chen's body disintegrated faster and faster. If this continued, the lava would probably reduce Chen's entire body to nothingness in under half a minute. In the end, his soul would be wiped out. Currently, Chen faced great danger. If he was still conscious, there would be hopes of him escaping from the lava through the toughness of his chaotic body, but he just happened to be unconscious. Just as he faced this critical moment, the damaged Inata tower appeared near Chen, rapidly approaching him. Afterwards, Kaya, who was forcefully tossed inside by Chen earlier, suddenly flew out of the tower with a barrier of energy, heading straight for Chen. As soon as Kaya left the tower, the barrier of energy around her dimmed at a rapid pace. It only lasted for a moment before showing signs of shattering. However, Kaya moved extremely quickly. When the barrier of energy around her shattered, she had already grabbed Chen's burning body successfully and returned to the Inata tower with a flash. At that moment, if Chen was still conscious, he would definitely be astounded because Kaya managed to move in and out of the Inata tower as she wished without the permission of him, who was basically the de facto owner of the tower now. Kaya gently placed Chen onto the ground on the first floor. When Chen's body came in contact with the ground, the solid stone he touched immediately began to melt, forming a small pool of scorching lava. Chen had just been pulled out of the lava. Naturally, he was still burning hot, so much so that he could even melt the tough rocks there. A sliver of worry appeared in Kaya's eyes when she looked at Chen's wounds. After a moment of thought, she took out several god-tier heavenly resources from her space ring and ground a portion of them to dust before gently sprinkling a portion onto Chen. She directly fed the other portion into Chen's mouth. There was naturally no doubt about the efficacy of God-tier heavenly resources. Chen's wounds immediately healed at a visible rate. His charred skin gradually recovered some of its normal color. This time, Chen was extremely injured. Even with the heavenly resources and the regeneration of the chaotic body, it took him 3 whole days before he fully recovered. Even though the wounds to his body were healed now, Chen remained unconscious. Ziyun and Xiaoman had already arrived beside Chen. They looked at him as they showed deep worry. Is Big Brother fine? Why isn't he awake yet? Xiaoman squatted beside Chen as she asked in dejection. He's already fine. It's just that something has happened to his soul, so he should remain unconscious for a few more days. Kaya looked at Chen and said softly. Ziyun will never forget the kindness that you two saviors have shown. If I get the chance, I will definitely return it. Ziyun bowed at Kaya deeply as she said sternly. She was grateful. This time, Chen remained unconscious for a very long time. Only after half a month did he slowly wake up. As soon as he opened his eyes, he immediately felt a sharp pain in his soul. Ah! Big Brother, you're finally awake. Fantastic. That's fantastic. Sister Ziyun, Sister Kaya, Chen has woken up. Chen heard Xiaoman's voice first. It was filled with excitement and joy. Without any need for a reminder, Ziyun and Kaya had already sensed that he was awake the moment Chen opened his eyes, as they were God Kings. They all made their way over. Chen sat up slowly. He looked around with some confusion, but soon afterwards, everything that happened before he lost consciousness flashed through his head, allowing him to clearly recall how several supreme God Kings had surrounded him, all the way until the evil power took over. However, Chen had no idea what had happened after the evil power took over him. Are we safe now? Chen looked at Kaya and slowly stood up. As soon as he stood up, he staggered as he felt dizzy, almost falling over. Kaya immediately supported Chen and asked out of concern, Chen, are you fine? Chen shook his head gently, I'm fine. My soul is just a little damaged. It's probably caused by the evil power. We're currently in the tower, and the tower has sunken to the very bottom of the lava. It's impossible for the people above to come here, so safety is not a problem. Go heal up first, said Kaya. Savior, I have pills that can heal the soul here. Please take them. Ziyun immediately passed a jade bottle to Chen. There was a god-tier pill for healing the soul in there. A chaotic prime from the Daoist sect of Neptunia had left behind this pill. She had obtained the chaotic prime's legacy, so she naturally obtained all of his belongings. There's no need. I have heavenly resources that can heal the soul. I'll go into seclusion for a period of time to heal that first. Chen immediately entered secluded cultivation. He used the sap from the last 2 pieces of amethyst spiritual bamboo to heal the injury to his soul. The amethyst spiritual bamboo originated from the Xianhuang microcosm of the sea realm in the lower world. It was a heavenly resource that could heal souls, and its effects were extremely powerful. Coupled with the fact that it grew in the Xianhuang microcosm, allowing Xianhuang qi to permeate it all year round, it possessed some Xianhuang qi, which strengthened its effects even more. As a result, even though the grade of Chen's amethyst spiritual bamboo was not particularly high, and it was supposed to have no evident effects on God Kings, when Chen dripped the sap on his forehead, his soul still recovered in a very short amount of time. I've used up all the amethyst spiritual bamboo I obtained from the Xianhuang microcosm. Chen slowly opened his eyes. His wounds had already recovered during the half a month he spent unconscious, and now that his soul had healed as well, he was at his peak condition once again. However, he showed no joy at all. Instead, he frowned and seemed worried. The previous battle had allowed him to properly realize that the backlash of the evil power was becoming more and more powerful. Although he could still suppress the evil power right now, once the power of his soul was severely depleted and his wounds were too heavy, the evil power in his soul would be able to fight back at any moment. Even the warnings of the sword spirits would be useless. However, the part that made him feel powerless was that he had already become a god king, yet he was still unable to solve this personal problem completely. This was because the evil power had fused with his soul, basically becoming a part of him. Purging it would not be easy. At this moment, Kaya arrived before Chen. She looked at him in worry, and she seemed to know that something burdened Chen's mind. She said, Chen, you don't need to worry too much. There are many supreme god kings from the god king's throne in the Neptunian divine palace. They all come from peak organizations littered across the saints' world. Their knowledge cannot be compared with those regular god kings. They might know some ancient method to completely deal with the problem of your soul. In our current situation, it's difficult for us to make peace with those supreme god kings unless we hand Xiao Man over. Whatever, let's not talk about this anymore. Even if we worry, it'll be useless. It's better for us to see the world beneath the lava. Hopefully, it won't disappoint me too much. Chen stood up, and the grimness disappeared from his face in that instance. He smiled freely, and with a thought, he controlled the power of the Inata Tower to move him and Kaya to its entrance. The entrance of the Inata Tower was a damaged door. It was damaged to the point where it did not even need to be opened, and anyone could pass through it. It was even possible to see the surging lava outside through the entrance. Of course, Chen knew that this door was only a matter of appearance. The Inata Tower was a god artifact of impressive quality after all. Let alone right now, even if the door had been completely taken away, no one could enter the interior of the Inata Tower without his permission. Even if every inch of the space outside was filled with lava, it was unable to seep in through the gaps in the door. The lava here is far too powerful. With the current strength of the senses of my soul, I can't expand it beyond the lava at all. It looks like I need to go out personally. Chen frowned and said sternly. He understood just how terrifying the lava outside was. Even if he pushed the defenses of his chaotic body to the limits, he could not last for very long. You have to be careful. This is the very bottom of the lava seas, where it is far hotter than the surface. With the toughness of your body, you were able to last a while on the surface, but at the bottom, you'll struggle to even last 10 seconds, Kaya stood up and said from beside Chen. She was extremely considerate, and she appeared to be worried. Don't worry. I know my limits. I don't want to lose my life here either. Chen looked at Kaya in a way to tell her to stop worrying. His face was filled with confidence. The lava at the bottom was indeed terrifying, but it was impossible for this lava to kill him instantly, where he would not even have the time to retreat back into the tower. Chen sucked in a deep breath and silently circulated his chaotic force, pushing the chaotic body to its limits. Afterwards, he set up a screen of light around himself composed from the laws of the sword. After making all these preparations, he left the Inata Tower with a flash and entered the scorching lava. Chen, you have to be careful. Don't travel too far away, and if you can't endure it, return immediately. Don't ever bite off more than you can chew, Kaya said from behind him. At the same time, she had already made up her mind that once Chen encountered any dangers, she would charge out without any hesitation. As soon as he left the Inata Tower, an indescribably terrifying heat came rolling over. In just a single instance, the screen of light around Chen became dull, and in less than 2 seconds, it had shattered already. What terrifying lava! If this lava was outside, probably even space won't be able to endure the heat and shatter as a result. The lava at the bottom really does have the ability to melt god artifacts. Only high-quality god artifacts like the Neptunian Divine Palace can endure such terrifying heat with so much ease. Chen was secretly surprised. The moment his screen of light shattered, the scorching lava pressed against his body, and he immediately experienced a heart-wrenching pain like a million ants gnawing away at him. It caused him to tremble gently. However, this pain was basically no different from an itch compared to the torture brought on by each breakthrough of the chaotic body. He endured it easily. But in the next moment, Chen suddenly froze up. This lasted for just a split second, and he began to tremble once again. This trembling was not because of how terrifying the heat was, but it was brought on by the great joy and excitement in his heart. Chen was unable to expand the senses of his soul at the bottom of the lava, and his visibility was reduced to only 100 meters away. However, within that 100-meter range, the ground was basically littered with fire-red divine crystals of various sizes. Chen was naturally familiar with these crystals. They were the valuable fire divine crystals. A single fire divine crystal was worth 10 times as much as a supreme-grade divine crystal of the same size. However, there were so many fire divine crystals at the bottom of the lava that they were like the stones in a riverbed. They blanketed the ground, forming a thick layer. It was truly innumerable. Chen could not help but begin breathing raggedly. Joy filled him completely. What was his reason for coming to the Neptunian Divine Palace? It was not for the legacies, nor for the treasures. It was mainly for him to obtain enough wealth so that he could use a teleportation formation to return to the Tianyuan clan as well as teleport to where the Daoist Sect of Divine Sound and the Ice Goddess Hall stood. The Daoist Sect of Divine Sound had his wife, Shangguan. The Ice Goddess Hall had his sister, who he had not seen for many years, Changyang Mingyue. There was even the heavenly palace of Bisheng where the Inata Grand Prime resided, as Ming Dong had been taken to the Saints' World by the heavenly palace of Bisheng back on the Tianyuan continent. Traveling to different planes quickly would cost an astronomical sum of divine crystals. Otherwise, he would have to take spaceships that would take thousands of years or even tens of thousands of years. Chen did not have the time to wait thousands of years, so he needed to use the teleportation formations. Yet right now, all the fire divine crystals before him made Chen see the hopes of reuniting with Shangguan, his sister Changyang Mingyue, and Ming Dong. Chapter 2094, Chen's Death. 1. Without any hesitation, Chen began to collect the fire divine crystals. He plunged his hands into the fire divine crystals and returned to the Inata Tower in a flash with them. Chen appeared out of nowhere in the Inata Tower. He tossed the fire divine crystals on the ground before immediately sitting down to heal his wounds by circulating chaotic force. He had only spent 15 seconds outside this time, yet his body had become quite injured from the terrifying heat despite the short amount of time. His skin had cracked, and it had become as red as a lobster. The clothes on him had naturally disintegrated as soon as he went out, so he was completely naked right now. Kaya stood beside him and looked at the naked Chen. Her expression became somewhat unnatural, and after producing a slight interjection of annoyance, she took out a set of clothes from her space ring and laid them on Chen before looking at the fire divine crystals Chen had taken in here. There was not a lot of them, only 8. However, every single one of them was the size of a fist, and they gave off a hot presence as extremely pure and tremendous energy circulated within them. It looks like there really are a lot of fire divine crystals below the lava, thought Kaya. Her eyes also lit up as she became rather excited. Chen healed especially quickly because he circulated his chaotic force to focus on healing, so he made a full recovery in just 6 hours. Chen, how's the situation outside? Kaya immediately asked after Chen had finished healing. Although she was no weaker than Chen, she did not possess a body as tough as Chen's, so she did not dare to go out without reason. As a result, she had no idea about the situation outside. It really has lived up to my expectations. There are indeed many fire divine crystals below the lava, but I need to find a way to collect them. I won't be able to get much if I just use my hands, Chen smiled. The lava was just too hot, so he did not dare to take a space ring out with him. As a result, he needed another method to collect the fire divine crystals. After a moment of thought, Chen took out the primordial god silk from his space ring. The primordial god silk had already snapped into 2 when it was fending off the crisis of the world, but Chen had refined it after all. As a result, he could control its length as he wished. With a thought, Chen immediately controlled one segment of the primordial god silk to knit itself into armor around him, while the other segment turned into a huge, golden net. The sword spirits have said that the primordial god silk can be refined into a supreme treasure of the world with extraordinary power. But refining a treasure like that naturally requires many high-grade materials, and there are harsh requirements on the person who refines it as well. As such, with my current strength, I can't refine it into a treasure. However, its quality is still there after all, so it shouldn't melt so easily in the lava, thought Chen. He equipped the golden silk mail as he held a golden net in one hand before leaving the Anata Tower in a flash once again. Outside, as soon as Chen arrived in the lava, he paid close attention to any changes to the primordial god silk. He did not want to damage something as precious as it again here. However, Chen stopped worrying very soon. As soon as the primordial god silk appeared in the lava, it shone with a faint, golden light as a wondrous power circulated within it, preventing the heat of the lava from causing any harm to the primordial god silk. The primordial god silk really is tough. It can remain fine easily in a place where even god artifacts can be melted. Probably only the evil power of the crisis of the world that can devour all things can damage the primordial god silk. Chen made up his mind. With a wave of his hand, he immediately cast out the net and engulfed a region of fire divine crystals. Afterwards, he suddenly tugged with his hands and pulled a great pile of fire divine crystals over. At the same time, 15 seconds had passed. Chen's body had reached its limits. He did not hesitate at all, taking the huge pile of fire divine crystals in the golden net and returning to the Anata Tower as quickly as he could. The armor knit from the primordial god silk could not be regarded as a defensive treasure. The scorching lava was still able to seep through the cracks and injure Chen. As a result, even when Chen had it equipped, he could only last for 15 seconds outside. Once he stayed for any longer than that, his life would be in danger. With a shake of his hand, Chen removed the net, and immediately, a great pile of shimmering fire divine crystals scattered on the ground. There were several hundred of them, where they could be as large as fists or as small as thumbs. His harvest this time was over 100 times more than last time. Kaya became stunned as well when she saw so many fire divine crystals. Although she had heard from Chen that there were many fire divine crystals outside, she had not thought there would be this many, where Chen could collect so much in just 15 seconds. Afterwards, Chen began to collect the fire divine crystals at the bottom of the lava en masse, without any consideration for exhaustion at all. He could only stay for 15 seconds each time he went out, and he would spend several hours to heal every time he returned. He repeated this time and time again, so he would harvest a great amount of fire divine crystals every single day. Chen basically forgot about Ziyun and Xiao Man, who were still in the Anata Tower. He was especially busy during this period of time, and he was completely focused on collecting the fire divine crystals. He did not even have time to talk to Kaya, who watched over him. In the days when Chen busied himself, the Neptunian Divine Palace was not peaceful. The news that the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace had awakened had already spread to various peak organizations, causing many supreme god kings who did not care for the legacies at all to take teleportations formations and head over from all parts of the Saints' world, gathering in the Neptunian Divine Palace. The sudden increase in unfamiliar faces in the Neptunian Divine Palace made the cultivators who had arrived first feel like a storm was brewing. They could already smell blood, causing all the cultivators to grow cautious. They felt insecure. Strange. Why have so many people suddenly appeared in the Neptunian Divine Palace? I feel like there is more than 10 times the number of people compared to before. Where did all these Neptunian medallions come from? The arrival of these people is probably related to the Neptunian moon. As for the Neptunian medallions, some peak organizations have already managed to make copies. After all, they haven't changed at all over several million years. Discussions like that could be heard everywhere in the Neptunian Divine Palace. However, whenever people mentioned this, they were grim. None of the people who had suddenly appeared in the Neptunian Divine Palace were simple. There were plenty of supreme god kings from the god king's throne, causing many overgods and some ordinary god kings in the Neptunian Divine Palace to experience tremendous mental pressure. At that moment, A white-robed young man with a striking appearance looked around the surroundings with some excitement on the first floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace. There was even a clear sense of eagerness in his gaze. Chapter 2095, Chen's Death. 2. Behind the young man were 5 guards in golden armor. The armor covered their faces completely, obscuring their appearances, which added a sense of mysteriousness. Many god kings gathered in small groups around the young man, but basically all of them stared in the direction of the young man in white robes, or more correctly, they stared at the 5 guards in golden armor behind him. They all showed surprise and angst. The young man ignored everyone's gazes. He smiled gently. Let's go. Let's go up and ask around. These people have only just come in, so asking them is useless. As the young man smiled, he had already run off while the 5 golden guards followed him closely. Did I see it correctly? The 5 people in golden armor seem like divine generals from the heavenly palace of Biyao. It can't be wrong. The divine generals of the heavenly palace of Biyao all wear a standardized armor that bears the insignia of the heavenly palace of Biyao. No one dares to replicate it, so they're divine generals of the heavenly palace of Biyao for sure. But it doesn't make sense. The heavenly palace of Biyao is such a supreme existence, so why would they send divine generals into the Neptunian divine palace? I don't think the heavenly palace of Biyao would have any interest in the Neptunian divine palace. You can tell with a single glance that the 5 divine generals are following that young man. But who is that young man? Is he a disciple of one of those majesties from the heavenly palace of Biyao? A fervent discussion immediately broke out at the entrance on the first floor after the young man had left. Divine generals of the heavenly palace of Biyao actually protected him, which raised everyone's attention. Even the supreme god kings among them became stern. It doesn't matter who the young man is. We can't afford to become his enemy. Even though the ancestors have once said that the Anata Grand Exalt died over 3 million years ago, the heavenly palace of Biyao still has the support of their majesties. Apart from the 8th majesty, none of the other 3 majesties can be provoked by our ancestors. Just a flick of their fingers will be enough to destroy our clans. At that moment, many god kings spoke to their people secretly. Even a few supreme god kings warned the people beside them sternly. To no surprise, the young man in white robes that everyone was talking about was Ming Dong, who had come to the Neptunian divine palace especially for Chen. At this moment, Ming Dong wandered through the Neptunian divine palace with the 5 divine generals of the heavenly palace of Biyao. He would go ahead and ask anyone he met about Chen, regardless of their cultivation. Chen? Never heard of him. Brother, I've only entered the Neptunian divine palace recently, so I really don't know who Chen is. Why don't you give me a method of contact, so once I get news about Chen, I can tell you immediately. Ming Dong asked several people consecutively, but the end result was very obvious. Everyone he came across had only entered the Neptunian divine palace recently, just slightly earlier than him, so they naturally did not know about Chen. When the people Ming Dong stopped saw the special attires of the divine generals and the insignia of the heavenly palace of Biyao, they all became extremely polite and spoke with much respect. They did not dare to waste any time. The heavenly palace of Biyao was indeed far too distant to cultivators who struggled at the bottom of the hierarchy. Some of them did not even possess the right to know about it. However, all the disciples and descendants of large organizations were familiar with it. There's no one who knows in the lower floors. It looks like I need to make my way up, thought Ming Dong. Then he looked at the 5 divine generals behind him and said, "The armor you wear is too eye-catching. Although I've come to the Neptunian divine palace to search for my brother Chen, 8th senior has set this up as training for me as well. If you keep wearing the armor, I won't be able to train at all, so put the armor away. Don't wear it unless I'm facing critical danger." "Yes, 9th Majesty." The 5 divine generals replied together and stowed the golden armor away, revealing their appearances. All 5 of them were middle-aged men. They were expressionless while their eyes were extremely cold. Every single one of them was a vicious person who had gone through countless battles and had maneuvered their way to their current position over the corpses of others. Just as expected, no one was able to recognize that they were from the heavenly palace of Bishing anymore. Afterwards, Ming Dong took the 5 divine generals with him as he made his way through the Neptunian divine palace. He went all the way to the 9th floor and finally stopped a god king that was passing by. He clasped his fist politely and asked, "Sir, have you heard of a person called Chen?" Chen? The young man who appears to be in his 20s. The one who comprehends the laws of the sword? The god king was surprised and replied with more questions. Yes. Him. It's him. If you know where Chen is, please tell me. I will definitely be extremely grateful, Ming Dong immediately beamed. He had separated with Chen for so many years, and they could finally meet once again despite being in a foreign land. He struggled to remain calm over this as he experienced great excitement. He was killed off long ago. Even his corpse doesn't remain. You're dreaming if you want to find him, the God King said indifferently and no longer paid any attention to Ming Dong, directly leaving by himself. Ming Dong's face suddenly froze. His excited emotions seized up at that moment, and his heart stopped beating. His blood stopped flowing. The news from the God King boomed through Ming Dong's head like a bolt from the blue. It stunned him completely. Chen is dead. He is already dead, Ming Dong murmured softly. He seemed to have lost his soul, but this only lasted for a split second. In the next moment, his gaze suddenly became extremely sharp and extremely terrifying. A powerful presence as tremendous as the ocean radiated from his body. Impossible. This is impossible. This can't be possible. Ming Dong roared out furiously. With a flash, he chased up to the God King, and he was no longer as polite as before. Ming Dong directly grabbed him by his robes and lifted him up as he bellowed out, "What did you just say? You're lying to me, right? You're lying. Tell me, you were lying me before. Tell me you were lying to me before." Ming Dong seemed to lose his mind. In the moment before, he was still thinking about the joy and excitement he would feel when he reunited with Chen, yet in the next moment, he heard that Chen was already dead. The difference between his thoughts and reality caused an extremely great impact on him. He struggled to accept it. Ming Dong's presence immobilized the God King. He could not help but pale in fright as he said with a trembling voice, "Senior, I've only heard that Chen's dead. I haven't seen it with my own eyes. Maybe I am wrong. You must be lying. My brother can't have died here," Ming Dong roared out as he tossed the God King far away. Immediately, he stopped a second God King and asked the same question. "Sigh. Chen really is dead. I saw that battle clearly from nearby. There were a total of 8 Supreme God Kings from the God King's throne throughout the entire process who worked against him. Chen fought against them despite only reaching God King recently, and he died on the 8th floor in the end. His corpse fell into the lava, so even his remains have been destroyed." The God King shook his head as he sighed. He showed much pity. It truly is a pity. A supreme prodigy like Chen has actually passed away at such a young age, dying to the hands of several Supreme God Kings. If he had enough time to grow, he probably would have the right to stand firmly as the first place on the God King's throne. After sighing gently again, the God King left Ming Dong's side. "Arg!" Ming Dong roared out. His furious voice rang through most of the 9th floor, and with it, an extremely powerful and terrifying killing intent exploded from his body like a flood. It reduced the origin energy in the surroundings to a mess. The second God King had personally witnessed the astounding battle, so he spoke with much detail. Everything he said seemed to flash through Ming Dong's head as if Ming Dong saw Chen being surrounded, fighting for his life against 8 Supreme God Kings from the God King's throne with his early God King cultivation before falling into the lava and burning into a crisp. Ming Dong became so overwhelmed with grief that he wanted to end it right there. He refused to believe it, nor could he accept that something like this would happen to the brother he had been separated from for so many years just when they were about to reunite. Reality had become so brutal. I'm late. I'm late. Ming Dong felt like his heart was being ripped to pieces as he was filled with sorrow. He knelt on the ground powerlessly, pounding it with punch after punch, causing it to tremble constantly like an earthquake was occurring. His eyes became bloodshot. Ninth Majesty, I'm sorry for your loss, a divine general comforted. Suddenly, Ming Dong traveled away at an extremely great speed with a single movement, directly flying towards the 8th floor. Ninth Majesty. The expression of the 5 divine generals changed slightly as they pursued while calling out. Ming Dong directly made his way to the 8th floor. Looking at the scorching lava below, he equipped a set of armor without any hesitation and charged towards it. To no surprise, the armor was a god artifact. Even though the armor would not be enough if he plunged to the bottom of the lava, he would last for a while at the surface. Even if my brother is dead, I can't let him rest here. Determination flooded Ming Dong's eyes as he charged into the lava resolutely. He wanted to retrieve Chen's corpse. Ninth Majesty, you must not. Behind him, the expressions of the 5 divine generals changed. They all hurried over as quickly as they could, stopping Ming Dong with speed even greater than his. Move! Ming Dong called out. His gaze was extremely sharp. However, the 5 divine generals were specially chosen by his 8th senior. They were the 5 strongest god kings of the heavenly palace of Biyao. Every single one of them possessed an extraordinary cultivation, and they knew powerful secret techniques. Their cultivation methods even originated from the Anata Grand Prime in the past, so they were even more powerful than some supreme prodigies. With them working together, Ming Dong was unable to resist at all. He was taken high up into the sky by them. Ninth Majesty, the lava here is extremely terrifying. It can even melt god artifacts, so if Chen has fallen in there so long ago, he has probably already been burnt to a crisp. If you're going to risk danger and go in there and waste your efforts, why don't you save it instead and avenge Chen? A divine general said. Revenge. Ming Dong gradually calmed down as his eyes instantly became filled with frigid killing intent. Afterwards, the 9th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Biyao, the 9th disciple of the Anata Grand Prime, Ming Dong, seemed to lose his mind. He scoured the Neptunian Divine Palace to ask about the 8 Supreme God Kings who ganged up on Chen, and he even put forth an extremely enticing reward for the identities and information on the 8 Supreme God Kings. As this matter spread, it caused quite a ruckus in the Neptunian Divine Palace. It even raised the close attention of a few Supreme God Kings from the God King's throne. It is just like what I said. Chen already possessed such great battle prowess despite only breaking through to God King recently, so he's definitely a prodigy from a great organization. Do you see it now? People have come to avenge him, even going as far as to turn on the 8 Supreme God Kings. Although I can't say I know all of the Supreme God Kings who attacked Chen, I do happen to know details about 2 of them. Both of them have extremely terrifying organizations backing them up. So who is this person who wants to take revenge for Chen? Is he bold enough to offend several supreme organizations at the same time? He'll end up screwing himself over before he can complete any revenge. Information on any single person from the 8 is enough to exchange for a supreme quality saint artifact. If you can provide their exact location, you will receive a god tier pill. Heavens, who is this person? He can take out supreme quality saint artifacts and god tier pills as he pleases. Isn't he far too wealthy? It looks like the person who wants to avenge Chen has extraordinary origins. He doesn't fear the 8 supreme god kings at all, and he isn't even taking the organizations behind the 8 of them seriously. Conversations about the astronomical rewards could basically be heard everywhere in the Neptunian Divine Palace. Let alone regular god kings, who were greatly enticed by supreme quality saint artifacts and god tier pills, but even a few unwealthy supreme god kings were interested as well. Once Ming Dong announced his astronomical rewards, it led to a surge in the Neptunian Divine Palace, becoming the new topic of conversation. Even the god kings who entered afterwards learned about the story behind the astronomical rewards and understood that an extremely impressive god king had appeared in the Neptunian divine palace. The supreme god kings who entered later were very indifferent to the matter. They did not take it too seriously. They either possessed extremely great backgrounds or extremely great strength. They had not come for the legacies or the treasures, but for the Neptunian divine palace itself. But very soon, another piece of news related to the rewards rang out. Not only did it stun basically everyone in the Neptunian divine palace, but even several supreme god kings showed disbelief. The capture of any one of the 8 god kings will be rewarded with a low-quality god artifact. He's insane. He has gone insane. This person is a complete madman. Is this person kidding with us all about giving a low-quality god artifact as a reward, or is he really that rich? Heavens, that's insane. A god artifact. It's a god artifact. Even if it's a low-quality god artifact, it's still something that's priceless in the saints' world. Let alone the fact that even Supreme God King would treat it as an absolute treasure, but even many infinite primes would be willing to go through bloodshed for a low-quality god artifact. The capture of a single person will be rewarded with a low-quality god artifact. Doesn't that mean there are 8 low-quality god artifacts if all 8 of them are captured? That's unbelievable. Who is this person? Can he really take out that many god artifacts? Once god artifacts were thrown onto the table, it immediately shook up the entire Neptunian divine palace. Even the supreme god kings who came in later were stunned. The 8 supreme god kings who worked against Chen naturally raised much attention under the enticement of such a great reward. More and more people looked around in search of information about them and their whereabouts. Ha ha ha, Chen is a mere early god king. Why would he need the 8 of us to deal with him? Any single one of us would have been enough to crush him effortlessly. The reason why we all worked together was not because of how powerful he was, but because he possessed something that interested us. We all wanted it for ourselves, which was why it seemed like we were attacking him together. Whoever wants to avenge Chen, I'll be waiting for you at the Moon's View Peak on the 10th floor. I hope you don't make me wait for too long. The supreme god kings who attacked Chen were rather arrogant, and they stepped forward themselves. In the end, the message made it to Ming Dong very quickly after being passed on by countless people. Moon's View Peak, Ming Dong murmured on the 9th floor as killing intent filled his eyes. He directly made his way towards the Moon's View Peak with the 5 divine generals. Currently, an old man and a young man stood on the top of a mountain in a remote mountain range on the 9th floor. They were grave. Whoever is bold enough to take revenge for Chen must have a huge background. And he's even fearless enough to directly place bounties on supreme god kings, which means he is not taking them seriously at all. Let's hide for now and not go out temporarily, the old man among the 2 said grimly. The old man was one of the people who attacked Chen, Tsang Ying. The young man was the supreme overgod who ranked first on the overgod's plaque, Mo Cheng. With his cultivation as an overgod, he could kill regular god kings. Although he was not as great as Chen, he was still a shining star. He's fearless, but that doesn't mean we should fear him, Mo Cheng said coldly. Even though he was nowhere close to the supreme god kings right now, he was not afraid of people like that at all. We're naturally not afraid of him, but young master, you're still not the opponent of supreme god kings yet. Once we encounter the person who wants to avenge Chen, I have no confidence that I can keep you safe, said Tsang Ying. Then I'll contact master and get him to send reinforcements, said Mo Cheng. There's no need to alarm master. The journey to the Neptunian divine palace is only training for you after all. At the same time, a young man in gold robes sat on the ground somewhere on the 10th floor. His face was pale as he seemed frail. Before him, there was a man in black clothes. He was also pale-faced and frail. Gongzheng, our souls have been injured by Chen. Even if we ingest god-tier pills, we can't recover in a short amount of time. We're nowhere close to our peak condition. In our current state, we have to work together if we still want to get a share of the Neptunian divine palace, said the man in black. He came from the Bai family, and his name was Biyao. The Bai family was also a great clan in the saints' world. They possessed much strength. The young man in gold nodded, agreeing to Biyao's suggestion of working together. I heard that the person who wants to avenge Chen has even put forth god artifacts as a reward. What extravagance! Biyao, are you interested in going to the Moon's View Peak to see how skilled this person is? I was just thinking that. If we get the opportunity, we can kill him off during all that as well, Biyao said slowly as a cold light flickered through his eyes. The Moon's View Peak was originally a regular mountain that had no renown in the Neptunian divine palace at all. However, the mountain that many people had not even heard of before had become well known now. The supreme god kings who worked against Chen called the mysterious person with great wealth to the Moon's View Peak to fight. This immediately attracted a great deal of attention. For a time, all the cultivators in the Neptunian divine palace gathered over from everywhere towards the Moon's View Peak. They wanted to see who the person who had publicly placed a bounty on the 8 supreme god kings was, and they also wanted to see if he truly possessed the strength to do that. As people gathered over, the surroundings of Moon's View Peak naturally became busier and busier. There were even many supreme god kings among them. They either sat there resting with their eyes closed, or they gazed at the Moon's View Peak indifferently. 2 people stood up straight on the Moon's View Peak. Powerful presences radiated from them, flooding the surroundings and pressuring many regular god kings in the area greatly. The 2 of them were clearly both supreme god kings, and they were 2 of the 8 people who had worked against Chen before. They stood beside each other as they remained calm, quietly waiting for the person who had placed down the bounty to arrive. Do you think that mysterious person who set down the astronomical bounty will come? He'll definitely come. Since this mysterious person is bold enough to place a bounty on the 8 supreme god kings and take out low-quality god artifact like they're nothing, he's definitely far from simple. You can't be too sure. Maybe the mysterious person is just trying to make some noise. As for the low-quality god artifacts, have you ever heard of anyone truly obtaining one? People constantly discussed among themselves softly around the Moon's View Peak. They felt curious about the mysterious person who had set down the bounty, but they also felt some doubt towards him. At this moment, several streaks of light shot through the night sky, flying over from the distance with lightning speed. In the end, they hovered above the Moon's View Peak. There was a total of 6 people. The person leading them was a striking young man with a cold expression. Beside him were 5 middle-aged men in robes. They were expressionless, and their eyes were cold. Which one of you worked against Chen in the past? The striking young man hovered in the air as he looked down from above. His voice was frigid and contained heavy killing intent. To no surprise, the young man was Ming Dong. Everyone around the Moon's View Peak directed their attention towards Ming Dong. Even some of the resting supreme god kings opened their eyes in that instance. They were all curious about the mysterious person who had publicly set down an astronomical bounty against the 8 supreme god kings. It's actually him. The eyes of many people in the crowd narrowed. They became stern and also revealed some confusion. They were the people who had entered the Neptunian divine palace at the same time as Ming Dong, having personally witnessed the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bisheng follow Ming Dong. It looks like you're the person who set down the bounty. As for working together against Chen? Ha, do you think Chen needs the aid of us to work together? He's a mere early god king. Any single one of us is enough to kill him effortlessly. It's as simple as crushing an ant. It's just that he had something on him that interested us, which was why all 8 of us took part in the matter together. In the end, some of the people observing to one side took it as several supreme god kings working together against a single early god king. A supreme god king on the Moon's View Peak laughed aloud. Then he took out a piece of white cloth soaked in blood and waved it in front of Ming Dong. He sneered, "Do you see the cloth in my hand? This came from Chen, and it was cut off with his flesh. Speaking of which, it should be the only thing that remains of Chen, so if you want it, feel free to exchange it with a low-quality god artifact." Looking at the bloody fragment in the supreme god king's hands, Ming Dong's eyes immediately narrowed as he became grief-stricken. He could clearly sense an extremely familiar presence from the cloth. It was a presence unique to Chen's chaotic blood. Arg! Ming Dong roared out as killing intent surged within him. He burned with fury. Afterwards, he charged towards the Supreme God King on the Moon's View Peak. You've lost your rationality so easily. You're only capable of so much, yet you've placed down a bounty to avenge Chen. What a joke. But regardless of who you are, you will be dying on the Moon's View Peak today, the two Supreme God Kings on the mountain peak sneered. They exploded with shocking battle prowess as they became locked in battle with Ming Dong. The 5 divine generals with Ming Dong did not take part. Instead, they paid close attention to the battle. The trip to the Neptunian Divine Palace would be a very good training experience for their 9th Majesty, so they would not intervene unless he faced death. This person is nothing to be feared, but since he has come to avenge Chen, he'll become an enemy sooner or later. Why don't we kill him right now? Gong Zheng said coldly from within the crowd. He and Bai Yi had disguised themselves slightly, so they had no need to worry about other people recognizing them. There's no need to be in such a hurry. There are still 5 powerful guards beside him. Let's not do anything right now and observe some more first, said Bai Yi as he stared at the battle between the 3 of them. Violent booms constantly rang out in the air as the battle between Ming Dong and the 2 Supreme God Kings had already reached a level of great intensity. It had to be mentioned that Ming Dong was very powerful. He was at the level of Supreme God Kings without a single doubt. Not only was he no weaker than Chen, but he was even much more powerful in comparison. Not only did he fail to lose the upper hand as he fought against the 2 Supreme God Kings alone, but he even seemed to dominate them slightly. Although their battle had only lasted for a few seconds, they all became bloodied and suffered from wounds of various degrees. Sword Chi of Void Destruction. Suddenly, Ming Dong cried out, and the power of the laws of destruction descended. It condensed into a black strand of sword chi that was several meters wide. Radiating with sword chi enough to frighten everyone watching, it shot off as a black streak of light, heading directly towards one of his opponents. God-tier battle skill. That's a God-tier battle skill, many God Kings cried out around the Moon's View Peak. Even the eyes of the Supreme God Kings narrowed. Facing Ming Dong's God-tier battle skill, the Supreme God King did not dare to show any carelessness. He was stern and immediately cried out. Energy surged around him as the power of laws condensed from thin air, forming a blinding beam of light that suddenly shot out. He also used a battle skill. It was very powerful. Although it was not of the God tier, it seemed to have exceeded the 9th grade of the Truth tier. It was a pseudo-God tier battle skill. God tier battle skills were just like God artifacts. Normally, only primordial realm experts could use them. Among God Kings, including the Supreme God Kings on the God King's throne, the people who could use God-tier battle skills were basically mythical existences. Of course, there were some God-tier battle skills like the profound sword chi that borrowed the mysteries of the world and did not have such a great requirement on cultivation, allowing weaker cultivators to use them. However, let alone the fact that there was definitely no more than 3 of these in the entire Immortals world, even when the Saints world and the Immortals world were considered together, there would probably only be a handful at most. They were extremely rare and precious. Boom! With a deafening boom, Ming Dong's battle skill that contained the presence of destruction dispersed the shockingly powerful beam of light. Afterwards, it continued onwards without slowing down at all, striking the chest of the Supreme God King with unimaginable force. Crack! With a crisp sound, the defensive Supreme Quality Saint artifact on the Supreme God King's body immediately shattered. His entire chest caved in as destructive power rampaged through his body. All his organs and blood vessels were shredded to pieces while he became heavily injured. Blood constantly spurted from his mouth. Ming Dong's presence rose up, becoming more and more powerful. His killing intent had become so powerful that it almost seemed to become tangible. He stared at the person in fury and resentment as he made his way through the air. In just a single step, he crossed the huge distance and arrived before the Supreme God King. The sword in his hand shone brightly as he directly swung it with the laws of destruction. The attack seemed to form a domain, where the space around the Supreme God King froze when Ming Dong struck out. It trapped him there firmly, immobilizing him completely. Immediately, blood spurted into the sky, and the Supreme God King was beheaded by Ming Dong in a single stroke. His blood rained down on the earth as it glowed like starlight, making it seem like a meteorite shower. Do you know who I am? As long as the soul existed, it was not true death. The Supreme God King who Ming Dong beheaded was not dead yet. He stared at Ming Dong resentfully as he tried to put on a strong front with the mental pulse he let out. It doesn't matter who you are or what your background is. There is only death for all those who took part in the encirclement against Chen, because I, Ming Dong, will not let any of you go, Ming Dong said coldly. His face was frigid as his killing intent was extremely intense. He directly picked up the Supreme God King's head and cast down a seal through a secret technique, trapping his soul in his head so that he could not flee. Gu Li's master is an ancestral emperor of an everlasting empire. If you kill him, you better think about the consequences you'll be facing properly. The other Supreme God King no longer attacked him. He stared at Ming Dong from afar in shock. Ming Dong said nothing. He gripped the Supreme God King's head in his left hand as he killed his way towards the second Supreme God King with a sword in his right hand. After witnessing Ming Dong's strength, the second Supreme God King understood very well that he was not Ming Dong's opponent. He had given up on the battle long ago, so he immediately used a secret technique to flee without any hesitation. Stop him! Ming Dong called out coldly and immediately ordered the 5 divine generals. He really was not confident about stopping a Supreme God King if they wholeheartedly wanted to flee. The 5 divine generals had already spread out in the surroundings when Ming Dong started fighting, surrounding the battle. Under Ming Dong's orders, the 5 of them immediately raised their hands towards the sky and used a secret technique, locking down the region that they encircled. Sensing the changes in the space there, the expression of the Supreme God King who wanted to flee changed drastically. Suddenly, he looked at Ming Dong and growled, "Sir, do you really want to kill us all?" The response he received was a sword cleaving towards him mercilessly with the laws of destruction. They were not Ming Dong's opponent even when they fought him together, so the difference in strength was even more evident now that he was alone. Before long, the second Supreme God King was beheaded by Ming Dong in a single stroke as well. His blood dyed the sky and the moon's view peak red. The people in the surroundings had already become speechless by the time the battle ended. Their hearts surged. Supreme God Kings were almost like legends in the eyes of many people, yet right now, 2 of them had been slain right before them. The impact to their souls was so great that they struggled to calm down even after a very long time. The Supreme God Kings in the crowd were all grave. They stared at Ming Dong without blinking at all as if they wanted to remember his face firmly. The strength Ming Dong had displayed was enough to make many experts on the God King's throne feel angst. He doesn't seem like anyone on the God King's throne. Both his name and his characteristics are extremely unfamiliar. It looks like this person called Ming Dong hasn't attempted the God King's throne. Some experts on the God King's throne sighed in amazement inside. Let's go. This person is very powerful, and our souls are injured. We're not his opponent at all, Bai Yi said to Gong Jing secretly in the crowd. His complexion was ugly. Gong Zhang's face was completely sunken. He dared not look at Ming Dong directly, as he was afraid that Ming Dong would discover his existence because of his gaze. Bai Yi and Gong Zhang left carefully. They followed the crowd and departed from the moon's view peak. They had disguised themselves when they came, so they did not worry about being recognized. A veiled woman in a white dress stood tall and straight to another side of the crowd. She also stared at Ming Dong on the moon's view peak gravely. Your Highness, this person is very powerful. He probably has the right to make it into the top 100 firmly. For your safety, I'd recommend your Highness to leave the Neptunian Divine Palace. Over a dozen God Kings gathered beside the lady, protecting her like guards. One of the God King guards warned the lady secretly. The lady was the princess of an ancient empire with a deep heritage. She was also one of the 8 people who had attacked Chen. To another side, another woman stood in the crowd with an extremely low profile. She wore a cloak, obscuring her appearance. This lady was also one of the 8 people. She was a prodigy of a large clan, but right now, the beautiful face under the cloak was also grim. I never thought someone would come to avenge Jian so quickly, and they would be this powerful. It looks like I need to be more careful in the future, thought the woman as the light in her eyes flickered with uncertainty. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.